All right, guys, listen, this is a blues riff and B. Watch me for the changes and try and keep up, okay?
All right. Welcome, everybody, to the next stream that we've got going. We are continuing our coverage of the Kennedy era at Lucasfilm, which began in 2012. And we are quite certain that it will be ending in 2025. We think that this cat has run out of its 9 lives. So,
especially due to recent events. Recent events have accelerated that, but we're going to talk about previous events today.
Yeah, so what we are covering, last week we covered Order 66. Those were the years between 2022 and 2023, in which Disney kind of consolidated power. We had a glut of content come out, the Obi-Wan show, we had Andor season 1, Tales of the Jedi, the Willow series, which got memory hold, Bad Batch season 2, Book of Boba Fett. It was a ton of stuff coming at us, and we saw on there that Kennedy started to grab an upper hand inside the company, mainly by, from my belief system, mainly by sabotaging many of the shows and efforts led by the Jon Favreau camp within Lucasfilm. So we got through that, and it ended with what I believe is a pivotal event, which was the announcement at Star Wars Celebration in 2023 of a new Rey movie, which nobody saw coming, which was leaked out at the last second to very specific individuals, and no one else. And this movie has yet to materialize. So this week, we are getting into it. We are in part 7 of this discussion. We are almost at the end. I believe it'll be this coverage, and then next week, I believe we will bring this to a close. But this is 2023. A lot happened in this 1 year, and this is the year of rebellion. And the way I've set it up is I believe that, I think I said a second ago, my belief is that the announcement of the new Rey movie at Star Wars Celebration sent the system into a tizzy, because I believe Kathleen Kennedy was going to be retiring at the end. Was going to make an announcement at that point, and instead she announced a new movie and extended her lifespan at Lucasfilm for another 2 years. That's my understanding and belief of what happened, and the aftermath of this triggered several events, all of which began to be some bad news for Disney. Many forces from the outside world started to come in, and I believe the rebellion begins in 2023. So our guests for this discussion, we have 3 of them tonight. Lance, let's start with you. Let everyone know who you are and where they could find you.
Hello, I'm Lance of the Outcasts Creative. We are a group of creative individuals. Most of us work in the film industry. You can find my channel under the same name, where I interview other creatives, promote their work, as well as review films, older films, that kind of thing. I've got a weekly show every Tuesday at 10 p.m. UK time, 5 p.m. East Coast, and occasionally do stuff on Sundays at 8 o'clock, which is normally determined by if I've been raving or not the night before. Old school Star Wars fan, big time. Also work in the industry as well, so kind of know the practical side of these things, and have had many friends work on most of the projects we're going to be talking about. At least one on every one, I think. So
Yep, and Lance can provide some insight into what makes sense for the industry, what doesn't make sense. He's been in the trenches in the movie business, so he helps us understand what's going on, helps us fit the pieces together.
Very few decisions about Star Wars make any sense in the last 10 years, but yeah, I'll do my best.
Yeah, I think Kennedy herself is so unorthodox that she defies expectations and not in a good way.
Well, indeed.
Retro, you want to tell people who you are, what you do, and where we could find you?
Well, I am a big fan of retro films and TV. So I do a lot of videos on that, lots of reviews, lots of very, very deep dive reviews and deep dive talks about movies. And I also host a Saturday matinee watch party that we look at some of our favorite films from the 80s and 90s and other eras as well. But come on over to my channel on YouTube, Retro Nerd Girl, and you can also check me out on X. You will occasionally get a post from me about an old movie, or you may actually get to see one of my live streams as well. So
awesome, yeah. And what are we doing this weekend?
Well, this weekend we'll be watching Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom.
Yes.
Yes.
Which is amazing because as part of this discussion in
Ooh.
Lucasfilm and the Kennedy era, we have Indiana Jones Part 5 coming out, which we will get into, which is not good, but
yes.
Temple of Doom, I love it.
Yes. Also, I wanted to also add that I do keep close tabs on the news and all of the more recent modern films and things going on in the industry. So I'm well aware of all that too.
Yes, excellent perspective, deep insight. Retro will get deep into these stories and movies and film craft, and also sometimes provide some context into what was going on in the world at the time, what the significance of these movies were. And I'm looking forward. We covered a more modern film from 2014, Ex Machina.
Yes.
Me and Retro and Heath Robinson from Heath's Geekverse and Table Talk, and I can't wait for that one.
Yes, that's coming out soon.
And last but not least is Kamran Pasha. He is an industry insider as well. He is a screenwriter and has been working in the industry for quite a while and has written several screenplays for several prominent shows. He also understands intimately how the industry works, the patterns that, the ebbs and flows, the patterns, the good and the bad. And he is outspoken about it. And also, he helps us understand it as well. And a lot of us on the outside, we're curious, not just how the sausage is made, but why. Why is this happening? What is going on? How did Star Wars get so far off course? And Kamran sometimes can provide us some excellent insight into how that's possible. So to get into it, the Year of Rebellion, we did cover a few events of 2023, but I put them in last week's episode specifically because I don't really believe the rebellion did much or really mattered the way it did until Kathleen Kennedy made her announcement and kind of disrupted the fruit cart there. So one of the first major events of 2023 that really shows us the beginning of a rebellion against the system. Nelson Peltz, you guys remember this? Nelson Peltz comes out and starts to discuss this idea that he was going to make a bid for a proxy fight.
Oh, yes.
For Disney. He felt that they were spending money recklessly. I think Disney pretty famously overspent for Fox Studios. They went on a spending spree. Lucasfilm, $4.05 billion. And arguably, this was not money well spent. They seem to get all this content and really not know what to do with any of it. Does anyone remember the first time Nelson Peltz mentioned he was going to try to wedge his way into Disney? Lance, let's start with you.
This isn't a piece of news that I'm particularly familiar with. I do vaguely remember it happening, but I would be lying if I could offer a detailed opinion or analysis on it. I'm afraid it's.
Oh,
it's
okay, yeah, no
out of-
worries.
out
Retro,
of
do you
my-
remember this? The Nelson
Yes,
Peltz?
yes, I did. And there were many YouTube videos talking about this. And in fact, you know, a lot of people cheering for Nelson Peltz to put the pressure on Disney to make better decisions. And I think this went even as far as him going up against, you know, like he went straight ahead to try to kind of dethrone the present um, CEO, and it was really kind of interesting because you were, you know, this guy for some reason had really good points. I believe in one time he did a video or had some video where he was actually going through the grounds of Disney and actually were pointing out certain things that seemed a little off to him, and people were complaining about. So uh, I think there were a lot of people who were also pro Disney that did not enjoy his comments. So there were more people who were cheering him on than people who weren't, though, from what I remember.
Right. Now, you know, in November of 2022, Iger kind of ends up back at the top of Disney, kind of unexpectedly out of nowhere. And then you have what I believe was an announcement by Kathleen Kennedy to extend the party for her at Lucasfilm by announcing the new race. So now you suddenly are, you know, if all of our instincts are correct, what we know, and you know, from the major headlines like this and what is going on behind the scenes, you know, you've got people who aren't leaving. You know, they want to stay, and now you've got, you know, and I remember wondering, you know, how come no one does anything? Like, you know, is Disney, is everyone really in lockstep with what Disney and Lucasfilm are doing? Because how could they be if they're doing such a dismal job? And so here we have it. You know, they're called activist investors. It's a little bit of a misnomer because when I hear activist, I think, you know, people with signs picketing, mostly on the left wing, I would say, when I think of an activist. But the term activist investor actually doesn't refer to a left wing activist. It is somebody who is interested in changing the course of a company because they think that the company is either mismanaged or going in the wrong direction. So Nelson Peltz is considered an activist investor, and what he wanted to do was to get onto the board, Disney's board of director, which would give him access to certain parts of Disney, possibly even financial information, and at least be part of the decision-making process, potentially weighing in on some of the decisions that Disney was doing. So he comes in, and this is a direct challenge to Bob Iger, the Nelson Peltz threat to go into Disney like this. So it doesn't last long, but this made a lot of waves when it first came out. A lot of people were happy because this seemed to be something that I'm always looking for: self-correction. I would like
Yes.
to see if a company or a culture or an individual is going in the wrong direction and the mistakes start to mount. You would like to see a self-correction. And so this seemed to be that, a self-correction for Disney and Lucasfilm. It did not last long. The threat came, and about a month later, the threat was over. And I remember several of us were like, come on.
Yes.
So right here, CNBC activist investor Nelson Peltz declares Disney proxy fight is over because during this the pressure campaign for him to come on, what really happened was that Bob Iger said, "Hey, look, instead of a messy proxy fight, why don't you tell me what you want, and I'll consider it. You know, maybe we're on the wrong." So behind closed doors, Peltz, Iger, and his team decided that Peltz had some good points, and so he promised to do a restructuring within Disney, which included his successor, since the last one didn't take with Chapek. So he agreed to. So Nelson Peltz decides to drop this proxy fight, and I remember a lot of us were upset because the big self-correcting moment seemed to be in Iger's hands, and I think many of us had less faith in Iger's ability to self-correct than something forcing his hand like Nelson Peltz. Retro, what do you think?
Well, it's 2 years later, we're still waiting for the announcement of his replacement.
Totally. Isn't that
Um,
crazy?
yeah. I mean, that's just one of the issues. And there were a lot of discussion uh, about this particular situation, and it felt like a loss. I think for a lot of people, they felt like, okay, nice try, Nelson, but it didn't quite work. Like I said, people were cheering for this because he brought up so many areas in which people had problems with, and not just the situation with Star Wars and Lucasfilm, but the entire running of Disney, and how there were specific things that fans were calling out about the changes in Disney over the years. And it looks like they're doing some sort of big reconstruction now, but it doesn't look like it's in the favor of all of the things that were mentioned in this for changes, to be very honest. These are just changes that they are feeling like they have to do since Universal is doing so well. Universal is really, really, they upped their game, and Disney really feels like, okay, we really need a revamp. But
Yeah.
a lot of
Well,
people are upset because some of the things they're revamping are traditionally, like, people had been taking their family to see some of these sites for years, for generations, and
yeah.
now it's gone.
Yeah. Well, and and we've covered this for a long time. Lucasfilm kind of broke the mold when they decided in 2017 to really go after fans in the wake of The Last Jedi. That was new. We were kind of shocked by that, and for years this just went on and on and on. And so, as a fan, there's not much we could do. We all took to YouTube to some extent to voice our frustrations, and it created kind of a new subculture here on YouTube. But for the most part, the fans couldn't do much, and we kind of got into that. We were happy that Jon Favreau got in there, and it seemed like there was some movement on behalf of the fans for good Star Wars, for good Lucasfilm. And then we started to see in our discussion last week that really Favreau was beginning to run into some trouble in Lucasfilm as his
Yes.
productions were directly or indirectly sabotaged,
Hmm.
culminating or beginning with the firing of Gina Carano. And we saw shows with his name attached start to fall to the wayside and become
Yes.
really associated with poor production work, which was a shock. So here was a big wig, a big dog coming in, and he came and he went. So as a fan, it was kind of like, well, that didn't work. That didn't work. And Iger's in the center of Disney, and Kathleen Kennedy is standing in the center of Lucasfilm. So not much has changed. And this is
Yeah.
where you started to get out of the fandom kind of a continuous voice that said, they ain't going anywhere. So any optimism some of the fans had that things were going to change, get over it, lose hope, because it ain't changing. That there was that message starting to get out there.
Yeah.
So anyway, so that was one of what I would believe one of the first, another major sign of rebellion from the outside, trying to get into the center of this popular culture juggernaut, Disney, and then of course Lucasfilm. So, but the fans got what we thought was some good news coming. Okay, we thought there was some good news on the horizon here for us. Let's see, what's the date? March 1st, 2023.
Yes.
After a
We
year-long,
did think it was going to be amazing.
everyone was so excited about it. After
Yeah.
a year-long hiatus,
Yeah.
we haven't seen Mando since 2000. Let's see, what was the last time? The last episode, or Mando season 2 came out October 30th, 2020.
Hmm.
That's when season 2 launched. So it's since the season premiere of season 2, it's been almost 3 years. And you can chalk this up to the loss of Gina Carano. All these scripts had to be rewritten. We saw that the Book of Boba Fett was a mess. So we saw that there was upheaval on the Jon Favreau side. we had to wait a little bit of extra time, but here it is, Mandalorian season 3. This is the good stuff, right? This is the one thing the fans really had in order to buckle up and get going. And we have, oops, Mando. Oh wait, no, not that's Bo-Katan.
Yeah.
Lance, let's start with you. As the season started, before we got deep into the season, like around the time of the premiere, what was your state of optimism? What was your attitude toward The Mandalorian season 3?
Well, I knew about the rewrites because of people on the inside. I fundamentally, I'll say this for the public record, I fundamentally disagreed with Carano's firing. Her view on the world politics and social issues and whatever, I don't care any more than I care what Harrison Ford's views on politics and social issues are, or Carrie Fisher's. Or the only thing I care about with my actors is, can they act? Are they right for the part? Do they look good on screen? Do they serve the material? Is this the right person for the role? And her character was a great character. It was like she was cool, you know. So you wanted to see a continuation of that character. So because I was aware of the circumstances of her firing, and she was fired over Twitter, by the way, without being told. That would not be acceptable in any other job, in any other company. Just that of itself, because I kind of missed out on talking about Carano, so I'll just add that quickly. That's the main thing.
Sure.
That's the main thing I would have spoken about. Just not acceptable to announce over Twitter that you're firing somebody without telling them, especially in this industry where that would blemish your record. It would label you as a difficult person to work with potentially, and of course could cost you employment. Absolutely. So I wish her the very best of luck with her court case, and I hope she wins, and I hope she wins big, so it stops them from behaving like petulant children and treating people in this absolutely unprofessional way in future. However, the actress on the left is a very competent actress. She's been in a number of other high IP shows, so I was interested to see what they were going to do with her character, and Mando and so on. But I kind of felt like Grogu shouldn't have been in this season,
Right?
Because didn't season 2 end with the arrival of Luke, right?
Yeah. So the season finale of Mandalorian season 2 was the return of Luke Skywalker,
Right.
who took Baby Yoda, Grogu, from Mando, and willingly, Mando handed him over. And the idea was that he was going to train Grogu to become a Jedi. This launched a series of fan speculation that Luke taking Grogu was actually going to be the beginning of decanonizing the sequel trilogy, because it would change the storyline of the sequel trilogy, where Luke's first pupil was Ben Solo. Now it might but then again, in the Book of Boba Fett, immediately those hopes were dashed, because when Luke gave Grogu the choice of being a Mandalorian or a Jedi, he chose Mandalorian. So here we are in season 3, and Lance, if your instincts are correct, he probably wasn't supposed to be in season 3.
I don't think he was supposed to be in this season, because I feel like as much as I like the cuteness and all of that, and him eating fish eggs and things, I just feel that had played out, and I felt that what we wanted from season 3 was Mandalorian going on bounty hunter like adventures. That's doing missions and whatever, and because there was that sequence of Luke arriving and sequence of him leaving with Grogu is really significant. It's really important. If you make that redundant, it's a bit like Alien 3, where we've made such a big song and dance about Newt and Hicks surviving and Ripley going back and rescuing Newt. Only in the third film we just kill her off in the opening credits. This is a bit like, oh well, all that big grand entrance of Luke and everything else, that was all so spectacularly set up at the end of season 2, is now meaningless and may as well not have happened. They might as well have. It could have been anybody now that could have come in and whatever, help them out. Somebody else, I guess, with powers. But yeah, so it just kind of made all that a bit redundant. And I think it just got this off to a bit of a wet fart, for want of a better word.
Yeah. So I remember being with Lance thinking that maybe the magic of Grogu is starting to wear off a little bit. I feel like we have done a lot with this. We've seen it. It's adorable. We've seen him eat all sorts of things. So there was that sense that maybe this would it still be as magical and fun and merchandisey powerful as it was 3 years ago. Now the actress to the left that Lance was talking about, her name is Katie Sackhoff, and she was in like Battlestar Galactica. Her inclusion in this series was positive, right?
Yeah, I mean, she's a good actress. I really like her as Starbuck in Battlestar Galactica, and that was a controversial decision when everybody heard Starbuck was going to be a woman, and she completely won over her detractors by two factors. One, the show had a good script, and two, she was great in the part and she made it her own. So I was quite excited that she was in it, but the whole thing was crippled really by Carano not being in this season, and this season was a complete mess.
Well, yeah, in the early goings, this was mostly met as positive news from the fans that Katie Sackhoff was going to have a bigger role. Now, I was excited. I think I've said this many times on this coverage. I'm a big animated Clone Wars guy. I love the Clone Wars animated TV series, and her character comes from the Clone Wars. There's this whole subplot line with someone named the Duchess Satine, and she is the head of state of the planet Mandalore. And there was even kind of a romantic storyline between Duchess Satine and Obi-Wan Kenobi. Well, Duchess Satine's sister became a revolutionary on Mandalore, and her sister is Bo-Katan, who joins kind of a revolutionary guard unit. And there's a civil war on Mandalore, and Bo-Katan is intimately involved in this civil war on Mandalore. The Darksaber is comes from this storyline. Whoever has commanded the Darksaber is the leader of Mandalore. So when Bo-Katan was introduced in Clone Wars Season 7 again, I was excited. She was introduced, by the way, in Rebels. They brought her into Rebels. And then here now she's gonna have a more of a prominent role in The Mandalorian in live action, played by Katie Sackhoff. So at this point, I was excited. Retro, where were you with The Mandalorian as we started the season here?
Okay, well, and you remember my silent boycott? Well, I had broken it for Obi-Wan. And I was like relatively pleased, but also hopeful. So I said, okay, well, let's watch The Mandalorian, all the Mandalorian shows before season 3, because I know it's going to be amazing. And so I did watch the first and second season, and I loved it. I absolutely was like, where's this been my whole life? Except for the last episode of season 2, which I felt was sort of the natural ending of Mandalorian, period. Like, okay, we understand now there's no, this is pretty much it. But then in Boba Fett, there are these moments, these episodes completely devoted to Mandalorian, such as, him with the what is it called? The Darksaber.
The Darksaber.
Which is like a whole nother issue. I have a long list of complaints about the way it's used in season 3. And then we had sort of, Bo-Katan was involved, I believe, in the first season or the second season, but we knew we were starting to get to know her if you didn't watch all those other things. And she was a fantastic character. There's lots of really cool characters that was kind of like on her team. And so I was like, wow, this is going to be great. Watching season 3 was hilariously bad. But
Yeah.
and it was hilariously bad. But
Yeah.
was also like, wow, what happened? the formula was already baked into the first two seasons, right? Mando goes out on a mission and he finishes the mission by the end, and then he's done. And now we're going on for this like kind of other kind of storytelling, which felt a little off to me, with a lot of moments where you're like, okay, why doesn't this make sense? This should feel like should make more sense to me. But also to look at Star Wars, and so if you really don't have high standards for Star Wars, this is going to look amazing. You know what I mean? It really is going to look great. It looked great. They had monsters. They had, Mandalorians flying all over the place. It was great. Some people were complaining. I remember some people were complaining about the show and said, wait a minute, this doesn't feel like it's the Mando show, but now we're moving towards like the Bo-Katan show. And then the pushback was, oh, guess what? They never did say which Mandalorian was the leading title, the titular character. When you had a character like Grief, you had a character like, oh, I'm sorry, I keep getting up.
There you go.
Okay, you had a character like Grief Karga, played by the legendary Carl Withers, consistently calling Mando since the beginning. I'm like, wait a minute, what's happening? So I really enjoy it for reasons that are probably not conventional. I had a lot of fun watching it, but it didn't feel like any of the first two seasons. And they dismantled what was already like what was working well. I'm feeling like a lot of interference. This no longer feels like Jon Favreau.
Right. Well, this has all the hallmark fingerprints of Kathleen Kennedy move, and I call this lead checking. Lorena Creel and I had a long discussion about Girl Bosses, and I actually went through and categorized different ways women can become involved in a franchise. And I think I found like 7 different basic ways that there's either a female version of a male character, a female takeover of a male franchise or a mostly male franchise. A background or side character moves to the forefront, like in Finding Dory. And by the way, for every example that we're like, oh yeah, I know, I found ones where it worked. These weren't all failed ideas by nature. There were times that it worked, and then we started getting to these times where they didn't. This I called lead checking, where you put a female next to the lead character, and she basically either starts to steal the thunder, puts him in check, or take over the show. You get a little bit of that. We'll get into it with Indy 5. But we're starting to get that here. In 2023, I was excited because my book was about to come out, and The Heroine's Labyrinth, and I was discussing this bizarre association between heroines and apocalyptic imagery. And then, so here again, you have Bo-Katan and her world's destroyed, and she's kind of going through the wreckage of her world. So early on in Mando season 3, I was like, here's yet another example of this. So early on, I was excited, but I did sense that there might be something off because after 2 episodes, my kids no longer wanted to watch it with me. Kind of broke my heart, where I was like, hey, you want me to wake you up early to watch Mando? They're like, nah, let's watch it over the weekend. Then the weekend would come, and I was like, hey, you guys want to watch Mando? And they're like, nah. So unfortunately, it seemed like there was something a little off by the time 3 had gotten started.
Yeah,
Cameron,
and
how did you feel when this got started? Season 3, before Jack Black, for all that.
Wait, I'm sorry, you're talking to me? Your voice cut out.
Oh yes, Cameron, where were you when at the beginning of Mando season 3? Were you optimistic? Like, how were you feeling?
Well, I was of course optimistic, but I was aware that the plan was already skewed, right? I was aware that we've already seen a disaster with Boba Fett. That I could tell that several scripts from what looked like Mando season 3 were shuffled into the other into Boba Fett. So I was like, how are they going to fix that? Because I've explained that, when that kind of thing happens, you're left scrambling because not only have you tried to patch up this massive hole in your other show because you've lost a character that was apparently going to be a through line character, right? Gina Carano's Cara Dune, right? Aside from that, right? I was like, well, how are you going to cover? Now you got two episodes because Jon Favreau has been planning out pretty good arcs up to this point, right? They've been planning out pretty good arcs, beginning, middle, and end, which is how I do my storytelling, right? And then you have then you have this situation where like now several episodes of the arc have been removed. So how do you get how are you going to get from point A to Z? How are you going to do it, right? Remember, I have a method, which you've studied, right? My method of screenwriting, which is beginning, end, and middle. What happens when the middle is taken out? Right? Well, I mean, that my method falls apart because it can only work if you first know the beginning of your arc, the end of your arc, and then you work back to the middle. So he had a beginning and end of his show. We saw that. The beginning was pretty good. I thought the end was pretty good, right? But the problem is people were so discombobulated by the middle that they didn't stick around to the end or were dissatisfied with the end, right? Because they felt like something has gone terribly wrong. So it's literally, it was gutted. So they didn't have the time to figure out how to do it. So, then they threw in, here's a Jack Black thing and here's this, right? Those were filler episodes. They didn't serve the plot. They didn't serve the arc of the show. They were surprisingly different from the way he's been doing the previous seasons, right? So that, which one of these is not like the other gives you your alert that these are last minute patches. And you can imagine that Jon Favreau is sitting there fuming, trying to make this work because he's a good storyteller. And he's like, what do we do here? And then he's like, Kennedy's people are like, well, we got, we got Jack Black. We got this other person on the line. We've been trying to get them something. Hey, can we do something with them? Fine. Get off you already ruined everything. Let's just use them, right? Maybe we can get a humorous episode out of it, whatever, right? Do something, and it doesn't work. So this is the extreme damage that happens when your plans are thwarted, and so that's where we are, right? So I mean, this doesn't make sense. It doesn't fit into the show, right?
Right. Well, and this was the last episode of The Mandalorian I ever watched. Was this episode. Because remember, there were some things leading up to this episode that were starting to feel up. One, I was excited for Bo-Katan. When she started to get involved. In the first episode or two, I was excited for her, and then I realized that I just wasn't invested in her character. There was a lot of scenes, which we'll find out if this happens again with Ahsoka. A lot of scenes of her just kind of in the scene, kind of brooding and thinking, and arms folded, or sitting in her, throne, very just present and not really doing much. And that's not a character arc. That's, there's not much there. And there was also visions of the New Republic that were less than flattering in Mando season 3. And so I started to lose interest in it. And then when this happened, I was like, they lost it. They lost the line.
This was bad.
Yeah. I mean, there was a way I thought, okay, if for a moment there watching that episode, I said, okay, they could really make this clever by making it scary by the end, or flipping this to like Jack Black's character is a bad guy and he's been manipulating this princess, and like give us something to chew on. And that was, I was waiting and hoping that they would do something. They presented something with the robots, and I was like, oh, what is this? Like a robot revolution or something? What's happening? And they just like dropped every single interesting aspect that they had built for that. It was almost like, let's just throw a whole bunch of ideas together in an open loop and never close it.
Yeah. Well, and fans, it's funny because at the time, fans were mixed about whether or not it had gone off the rails. There were some people still defending the show, and I think, there was, you don't want Mando to be bad. Mandalorian was what we had that was good. So facing the fact that the Mandalorian reputation might be tarnished was kind of bad. Like we didn't want this to be bad, right? We wanted this to be good. And it was really hard to get past the fact that this was starting to struggle. Now, at the time, I started following the Nielsen ratings. So, and I was tuning in to see what was happening. Now, Nielsen ratings.
Great show every Tuesday at 10 o'clock on YouTube.
There you go. Yeah, Nielsen has a show called the Nielsen ratings, where weekly they go over pop.
Been waiting all year for you to say that, so I set that up.
But yeah, at first for Mando season 1, by the way, they did not track streaming. Mando season 2 was a little bit of a mixed bag, but I do remember that episode 3 opened a lot lower. This is what it was on Nielsen through 8 episodes. It increased its audience through the first 3 episodes, had a massive drop off by episode 3, but you see that it still kind of clung to a respectable showing. These numbers are pretty good. This placed it. So all Star Wars shows were essentially being placed in the Nielsen ratings top 10. And Mando, despite fan frustration, they continued to show up and watch the show. The Jack Black episode, by the way, was episode 5. So my prediction was that you'd have a massive drop off for episode 6. And that did not happen. In fact, they gained that. The next episode was their second best of the season, and it pretty much maintained and bled off a little bit at that time. So, it held on, and I'll show later the subsequent Lucasfilm shows and how they compare to Mando season 3. But I will just tell you, as a Star Wars fan, as someone looking at the Nielsen ratings, this is it. This is the last time Star Wars is seriously competitive in the Nielsen ratings for cultural relevance. This is it right here.
Yeah, that's sad.
So
so Kenny got what she wanted. I mean, she got what she wanted. This was the disruption that she wanted, which was near lethal. It was near lethal, right? Because it was whammy after whammy. You had Boba Fett, which was discombobulated because it was thrown off of the story he wanted to tell, and then the flagship that he had built, the one thing that everyone had 9 months before been praising for the return of Luke Skywalker, for resurrecting Star Wars, for giving us our childhood glory back, right? And now at this point, after 2 whammies like that, and the profound disappointment with several episodes, again, it's several episodes, really just 2 episodes really to throw off, because they're the 2 filler episodes you need to put in, right? That throw this off, right? So now you've got the fandom being stoked by people who are economically invested amongst the YouTubers to create conflict, right? So now they're being told that this is just Favreau was a false prophet. He was never. This was always his plan. It was always his plan to ruin Star Wars. He was just giving us false hope.
All roads lead where, Kamran?
All roads lead to the sequel trilogy, right? And then no matter what they do after that, everyone is looking at it from an extra critical perspective, like finding problems with Obi-Wan. We had a discussion. Some people liked Obi-Wan. Some people don't like Obi-Wan. I liked Obi-Wan, again, because I could see what they were trying to do, and I could see the pressures they were working under because I work in this environment, right? But people were already they weren't willing to give it a shot. They're like, all right, let's look how they're going to screw this up. Oh, that doesn't look like it fits canon. Doesn't that contradict something that Obi-Wan said in the New Hope? They don't know what they're doing, ignoring everything that was actually quite good in that show. You can criticize the characters but there was a lot of good stuff in that show. I think some of the lightsaber battles were great. I think, like I said, we talked about this last time. I thought there was a lot of good stuff in that show, objectively. But people weren't even willing to give it that because they were already so hurt. It's like discovering that your soulmate has cheated on you, right?
Right.
Your life partner has cheated on you, and you thought they were the greatest, loyal person, and so that's where you are. So now you're psychologically damaged as a fandom again. No matter what you do, it's not allowed to work. Then we're gonna get to it. The acolyte, shows up to add, this really close to killing blow, right? And this is amazing to watch how Favreau's vision gets destroyed by one person that he had invested so much of his storyline into, Cara Dune, being pulled out days before production begins. And it causes, this is the kind of ramification of damage it causes, multi-year damage, right? And the loss of trust in the fandom, which we're still getting back from, all right?
Well, and Mandalorian season 3 is, I would say, the culmination, the final culmination of that attack, that zinger where they took out Gina Carano. And now this comes out, and we see what this did. We saw what it did to Book of Boba Fett. We saw what was happening with Favreau's vision. And it's falling to the wayside. It's starting to collapse. And Mandalorian was the one thing that was working, and working on all levels. It was working at the merchandising level. It was working on the pop culture level. It was working. It was charting in the Nielsen ratings. It was culturally relevant. It was still an event. Now that has been destroyed. It has been destroyed. So Mandalorian season 3 is becoming reputable as pretty much the season that ended. The show, and at least at the time, there will be a resurgence, as we'll see later. But at the time, this was really the end of the Mandalorian. They had lost, the audience had dispersed,
Yeah.
and as we'll even see further, the audience will never come back.
Well, I don't know that they'll never come back. I don't think that's fair to say, Doug. I think the audience will it will be a long process.
No. What I was saying was up until now, the audience has not come back. But I do agree with you. I do believe that the fans can come back, and I do believe that it's one great Star Wars project away from uniting the fandom. We saw what 6 minutes of a season finale could do to united fandom. Imagine what they did if they turned out some really quality product. It is
consistently though.
Well, there should be some consistency, and you can't have this dual vision. What I'm saying is, with this pretty much dispersed the fandom up until now. The returns have really dropped, and I'll have some side by side comparisons.
Okay, yes, keep going. I was going to say something, but you're probably
go ahead. Wait, you don't want to say it?
No, because we're going to probably talk about it soon.
Oh, okay. Okay, so my point is, at least in terms of the timeline, this was a pretty devastating blow in the boxing match that we've been watching. This seemed to be decisively victorious for Kathleen Kennedy's camp. This happened. Mandalorian.
You can tell there's a war going on. It's not a secret when you watch a program like we watch both Boba Fett and Mandalorian season 3. You're like, okay, this is so weird and wacky. Who's fighting behind the scenes? Because this is not one vision. There's no way this is one person's vision.
No, it's been a mess. It's characteristic of what we've seen with the sequel trilogy, and now through this, that there's all these competing visions. None of it makes sense, and the ultimate result is a poor product as a net result. So, but Mandalorian season 3, it came, it went. It was not considered to be the great show we were hoping for. But not only that, remember, this is the year of rebellion. We saw Nelson Peltz come and go, and we're about to get another strike for the rebellion against what we've been seeing all this time. Let's see. It is March 8th, 2023. Lucasfilm is sued. Here's an article on Deadline. Lucasfilm is sued for, quote, egregious axing of producer Karen McCarthy from Star Wars series The Acolyte. So The Acolyte, which was predicted it should never have been made. If you understand the logic, as I have been made to understand it in Hollywood, it never should have got off the ground. And here we have this producer fired, and now she's like, what? Now, Cameron, I had heard her severance was something like $5,000, something like.
Yeah, it was a few $1,000s. It was literally like $5,000 and go away. I mean, that's just beyond an insult. I mean, this woman makes $1 million a year, right? Working as line producer for HBO shows with top people. She's offered to produce, what would become a hit show, Sugar, right? With Colin Farrell. That would become like an award-nominated hit show, right? For Apple. And, $5,000 was literally what she was offered to go away. And when she had moved to the UK, right? She had packed up and moved to London, was to find an apartment because she'd been told you're going to be there for at least a year. Mm-hmm. And she's sitting there in London, not getting her emails responded to. Like, hey, so I'm here. So when are we having the meeting at the studio at Pinewood, whatever that thing is called, right? Pinewood, right? When are we meeting? No answer. So when should I go into because Lucasfilm has offices in the UK? Should I set up meeting at the UK office? No answer. It's like, well, I'm here, guys. I'm here. And they're like, you know what? We really can't move forward. But don't make a big drama about it. Here's $5,000. Look, that might cover her flight back, right? Okay.
Yeah.
It's what? This is egregious behavior by Hollywood standards.
Right. And this was also slightly embroiled in something Cameron was involved in. He was like, The Acolyte is not going to happen. It's not going to. And for a while, it looked like it wasn't going to happen. There was no movement on it. This, though, is some evidence that Cameron was right, that there wasn't really a show. And now you've got someone from this is like reality starting to come home to roost, right? You've got someone who was like hired, quote unquote, for this and then let go of. And now she's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I think this is illegal what you did. You can't hire me and fire me like this. So, and by the way, this lawsuit is ongoing, and we will get a resolution to this one way or the other. But here is evidence that she signed on to something that perhaps did not exist or was never intended to be taken seriously, but it was intended, as at least now I theorize as well, for the headlines.
Headlines and to leverage it into reality. Because, like, once it's in the trades, it's supposed to be real. And if anyone contradicts the trades, if Bob Chapek were to come out and say, it's not true, I never greenlit this, that destroys the whole system. Because then you're like, well, Kathleen Kennedy says you did. So is she not in charge? And then suddenly, are you in charge? And then the trades are like, who's lying to us? Somebody's lying to us. And the whole propaganda narrative system of Hollywood collapses. That's what Miss Kennedy understood. Once you put something on the trades, it is true. However, just to skip ahead to this moment, right? To the flip end of it, right, is that was exactly the rule that she violated, because that's the golden rule of Hollywood. Once in the trades, you have to go along with it. It's sort of like, have any of you taken like acting classes where you do sort of ad-libbing kind of stuff? And one of the rules is that whatever the other person says, right, you have to agree with. So you have to go with it, have to build on it. So if your thing, and then the other person in this ad lib says, I'm pretty bad we were able to hide that body yesterday. You have no idea where that came from, but now you've got to agree with it. It's like, wow, yeah, it's great. I really had to kill that person. Thank you. You just have to build it. That's where that comes from, right? So that's what this is. This is trades are ad-libbing. We all have to go along with it, or the performance vanishes, right? And so what happened a few weeks ago was that the trades, 3 trades, Puck initially, and then followed by the Hollywood Reporter and Variety, announced that Miss Kathleen Kennedy was leaving this year. And then Hollywood Reporter did a lengthy piece laying out the succession plan with all the candidates. Lengthy piece, right? Research, contacts. The original Puck reporter, Matt Boloney, said, I spoke with 3 people at Lucasfilm that confirmed she is out. Right? I'm sure one of them was was Favreau. So this was the narrative of the trades, of the biggest trades, of Variety and Deadline, Variety and Hollywood Reporter, the oldest trades going back to 1930, right? Then suddenly the one trade that kept silent after about a few days of, Kathleen Kennedy's really out, Kathleen Kennedy violates the ad-libbing rule. She goes to Deadline and does this rambling interview where she kind of pretends to deny that she's leaving. But in the end, she's like, yeah, I'll leave this year, but on my terms. I mean, she affirms what he said, but it's all buried in her language, right? And violated the rule. This is what set Favreau off. That's why because it's like, you violated the ad. We let you announce the Ray movie. We let you announce this Acolyte. We let you do all this stuff, and we went along with it even while we tried to sabotage it, right? Behind the scenes, because that's how you play the game. But we didn't come out and deny it to make you look like a sucker, which is what you did. Now Variety and Hollywood Reporter look like suckers for printing false information from multiple sources, right? That you've just destroyed the crowd of the trades, and now they don't trust you. So this tactic that she used to advance her projects, ultimately, at least this one, the Ray movie will never happen, but this one at least got made through this tactic, has come back to bite her now, because now she has no allies left. Because Favreau's like, oh, I played along, you didn't play along, I'm done with you, right? And the trades are like, you think Hollywood Reporter isn't waiting for her to leave to do a terrible expose because she's now claimed the Hollywood Reporter is lying? You think they're not going to get revenge on that? Because you don't do that. You can deny someone's claims. You don't deny an exclusive report by the trades that are backed by multiple sources. You can deny someone else claiming something, but when the trades present something as truth and you deny it, you are attacking the entire circulatory system and giving the system a heart attack, right? And so this is now we're
away from everybody else, right?
I'm sorry, say that again.
You're taking the credibility away from everybody else, and
you're taking the credibility away from everyone else. You're making everyone else. Matthew Boloney was the editor-in-chief of the Hollywood Reporter. He does regular, articles about sitting down with Bob Iger for lunch. He has that level. You think this guy would put out Kathleen Kennedy is leaving without multiple sources, as he himself said? He's not going to. And then to have her pretend that that's not true and then kind of confirm it's true. He got so angry. Boloney, when this came out, the next morning he posted on Puck an angry missive basically mocking her, mocking Kennedy, mocking her PR people. He says the reason this got out is that her PR person was desperate. He reveals how the hamburger is made, how the hot dog is made. He said her PR person named him. The PR person has been desperately calling all week since my scoop, has been calling all week for somebody to present, to refute it. And nobody would publish it because they knew I was right. And then they went to deadline, and then you know what he says? Because one of the rules is also you don't insult the other trades. He called the reporter who did his sort of kiss ass interview. He's literally said, "This guy," he says it in public. He posts it. "This guy has never found the anal cavity of a powerful person he cannot crawl into." Right? And he says that publicly. So he's like, she confirmed. That she's leaving this year, which is what I said, and she confirmed that there's a succession plan. Her only thing is what's on my terms. If you have to desperately call everyone to get someone to say that's on your terms, it's not on your terms, right? And so This is the reason I bring this, because this is a look back at the past, is this was where she established a successful media gamble that would blow up in her face because she wouldn't abide by the same rules, which is what Favreau expected. Once the trades all report her out, he expected her to go, "You know what? That's great. Yes, you're right. I'm out. And I'm so excited. I have a succession plan. This was my choice." That's what he expected. I know, because my contacts inside Lucasfilm were like, "Oh my God." Literally, that was the reaction. When they saw her their deadline, they're like, "You can't do that. That was the reaction. She can't do that. Does she have any idea what the ramifications of that are?" What she was supposed to have done is what Bob Iger said. Yeah, we're doing the acolyte, right? Yeah. I mean, that's what all these people went along with, hoping desperately that they could stop it. Eventually got out, right? And damaged the brand even further, as we'll discuss.
Right, yeah. So this was the year that all of this begins to happen. This is what I look for. Evidence from the outside world coming in. The crows are coming back to roost. You cannot do things that don't make sense, that no one can make sense of for this long without there being consequences. And these were the early consequences. The rebellion has begun. She's suing. Nelson Peltz was trying to get into Disney with his first attempt. And then now, speaking of rebellion, and I know, Lance, you might have a lot to say on this as well. The next major event, by the way, May 2nd, 2023, the Writers Guild decides to go on strike. Writers Guild goes on strike. So, Lance,
send me back to my horrible days. Why don't you?
Oh well, yeah. This was some rough stuff, man. And I have some funny headlines, Cameron. I can't wait to hear what you think about it. But Lance, how did the Writers Guild how much did it affect the UK?
Actually, it did affect the UK because there was a number of American productions that were already booked into Pinewood, Shepperton Film Studios, stuff like that. Feature films and series, but mainly series, and they all went on pause because with the way that we treat writers, we don't have scripts ready and things because we don't bring them on early enough and pay them enough. So
most of these strikes, it seems like there were some good ideas in the cause, and then some bad ones kind of latched on into this as well. I think that the thing that universally is agreed upon as a good reason to strike was the use of AI. How they would use AI, how that would affect writers, and is that what are the ethical ramifications of using AI in the storytelling industry?
Well, I mean, look, I'm a writer, so of course I'm going to be biased with my view, and my personal view is it should never be allowed any more than we should be creating AI actors. Now, once we get into the realm of AI mixing over with animation, which of course is already happening, we're getting into a really murky area there. When is it animation and when is it ripping off this AI character that we've created happens to really look like this actor? No, that's original animation. The fact that it looks like this actor is a coincidence. That's though you're going to see a lot of those kind of cases down the road. But yeah, I mean, the principles behind calling for this strike were, I think, fairly sensible. And there were some other things. It wasn't just AI. There were some other things as well. But it did have a huge impact on production. And I remember we were sort of still feeling the ramifications of the lockdown. And film production had only literally just got back on its feet. And then boom, this happened. and a whole load of stuff shut down again. And I know for a fact that I think at least 2 or 3 of my friends lost jobs over here because things were put on pause. But obviously, it wasn't as bad over here as it was in the States. I'm going to have to duck out shortly, I'm afraid, because it's now 2 a.m. in the pretty Dickensian city of London.
Well, at least go get some Indian food for breakfast, okay? Some of you guys have that for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, so it's good.
Funnily enough, I had Indian food for both lunch and dinner yesterday.
Am I wrong?
And it was very satisfactory, it has to be said.
Of course it is. The best food, best Indian food outside. It's better than probably in the subcontinent, what you've got over there. So yes.
Very true. We have amazing Indian food here, and I've got one of the best ones in London, literally 2 streets away from me.
And all people that are protesting immigration from South Asia are always at those restaurants. It is what it is. Why deny yourself a good meal while you're protesting?
Not many people protesting that in the UK. So not from that part of the world, anyway. So I'll duck out at this point. But thanks for having me on again, Doug. I'm sorry.
Absolutely.
Stay for the whole thing.
I love your commentary.
I will say, because I know you're going to cover it after I've gone, that I was not surprised that the Galactic Star Cruiser shut down. I was surprised that they didn't try to do something else with it rather than just shut it down. I mean, they could have turned it into a kind of like a walkthrough. We had a ride in the Trocadero in London, which is a big shopping centre called Alien War. And Alien War was like an attraction where a team of Marines giving you a tour around the bio life cycle of the alien, and of course it all goes wrong, and the aliens break out, and suddenly you've got to be taken out in a hurry, and aliens attack the group of tourists, and there's lots of gunfire, and it was tremendous fun. And I thought, they should do something like that with the Galactic Star Cruiser. They should have a one-way system where they're taking teams of or groups of visitors through the hotel, and the whole thing is populated by actors, and they're taking them through like a live RPG story from start to finish. They can even drop them off in the box cutters. Or I was surprised that they didn't just sort of all sit down and go, okay, what can we do with this? Let's try something else with it for a year. How about we turn it into some sort of live role-playing attraction? I
have a theory that it's the experiential side of creativity that is missing from the groups out there today. Like Lucas, I'm going to do a whole separate video on this at some point where I'm really going to get into the influences of the creative groups. And, Lucas was fascinated with speed and, got into a car accident, but you can see speed on the screen when you watch A New Hope. So there's real things from the outside world coming into these movies and these stories. And I think the people brainstorming creatively in these days are lacking those intense experiences. And they're kind of just, spitballing ideas. And you end up with, the Galactic Star Cruiser, which was a complete swing and miss. And it's because they would never think of something like you're describing. At least I don't think so.
Well, yeah, all the ideas that they did for that thing, most of them anyway, were not good. All right, guys, that's it from me, and thanks very much for having me on. Catch me on the Outcasts Creative channel. I think I'm back on 8 p.m. on Sunday, 3 p.m. East Coast time with another industry interview.
Great.
So, well, you got it, Lance. Hopefully we'll see you next week.
Enjoy some chicken tikka masala tomorrow morning, okay? Take care.
Oh, mate, that's what I had tonight, funnily enough. There you go.
Can do it 24 hours. It's your national dish, right? So
I don't know if I could do it for breakfast. That could have fatal ramifications in the flatulence department. But I'll speak to you soon. Take care.
All right, God bless. Take care.
Take it easy, Lance.
Bye.
And then Cameron, I think Retro.
Is it that we lost Retro Nerd? It's just you and me now?
Yeah, just you and me for now. Retro should be back. She didn't say she had to come out for anything, so something must have come up real quick. But I know you have some away as well. What's that?
I'm sorry, I had to step away as well, as you saw earlier. So things happen. So yeah.
Yeah, no worries. But I know you have some thoughts on the Writers Guild and the strike here.
Yeah, we'll do it.
I learned a lot about striking in the industry by listening to you speak on other channels or even on your Patreon. Now, you were part of the first writer's strike back in, what was it, 2007?
Yes,
right?
I was there. It was 2007, 2008. It was like it was like basically, it went through the fall of 2007. I think it was officially resolved like first few days of January 2008, but it was primarily 2007. Yeah, I went through that. At the time, I've been in the industry. I joined the Writers Guild on April 2nd, 2001, one day before my birthday, right? And so I've been at that point about 6 years into my career, and I was doing very well. I had that show Sleeper Cell, which got a bunch of Emmy nominations, Golden Globe nominations. Then I went on to do what was the next thing I did after that was Bionic Woman remake on NBC. So that was big for me because I was entering sort of a major network television kind of thing, right? And then the strike happened essentially in the middle of it. At the time I was very supportive of it because, you get rallied up and, and first of all, the only narrative you're hearing is what the Writers Guild leaders are telling you is what they want, what's happening. And after a few years, I got more information about how the negotiations went and what some of the positions were and what some of the things that we turned down and the things we got. I became less enamored of that strike, but that's hindsight, right? At the time, I was very supportive of it, and because what we were told was that we were fighting for at the time. Remember, it's hard to imagine Netflix didn't really exist at that time, right? Streaming didn't exist, but it was coming. We called it broadband in those days. Broadband, that was the word we used. That that it was all going to be on. The idea was seemed magical that you could just have everything on one screen, which is what we have today. But in 2007, that was just beginning, right? In
2007, real quick, I'll just jump in. In 2007, Netflix was kind of new, and they were mailing DVDs to your address back then. Remember that? You would online, they would mail you a disc. That was Netflix. Netflix was not the juggernaut.
They were just Blockbuster. They were just Blockbuster. They hadn't yet come up with the idea of streaming.
Yeah.
All right. But the time was we were being told that that's not going to be regulated by the Writers Guild, and this is going to be where the future is. There's not going to be any more network television or cable. It's all going to be on this one screen. And it didn't end up being exactly that, but it ended up being quite dominant. I mean, streaming is quite dominant, right? And it certainly has impacted other forms of media, network and cable and pay cable and all that. But they're not out of the game any more than radio was out of the game when TV started and all that stuff, right? But we believed at the time we were fighting for that, and then we would later learn that essentially that the other side, the studios, had largely given in on our demands for that early on, and then the fight became about other issues that were not as important to a lot of people, I think. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
My impression of what you had summarized in the past. Obviously, you care about the plight of writers. Obviously, you want you don't want to be taken advantage of. You don't want corporate interest to encroach too much. You want writers to be able to provide the value that they're able to provide. I sense that you're sincere completely in your desire to see writers succeed in Hollywood. But what I was understanding, just correct me if I'm misinterpreting anything, but was that you were getting or a little confused by some of the outcomes, like you had to fire your agents, and there was some strange.
Well, that would come later. So that would come later. So it's a 2007, 2008 strike seemed to be a rational strike over jurisdiction about a new impending form of media, that we would potentially be locked out of, right? For example, like animation isn't covered by the Writers Guild, and so you don't have the Writers Guild I didn't have the Writers Guild protections when I went to work for the Tron animated show, right? The Tron Uprising. I had to join the Animation Guild, which frankly doesn't have the same kind of power that the Writers Guild has, and so it doesn't really have those things. But God bless them, they actually have a pretty good pension plan, and I'm discovered recently that my work on Tron still makes me eligible for it, which is kind of nice. But it's good for them. That's very nice. But so then some years go by, and you get older and learn more, and and the world evolves, and then we had this drama that led to the strike. Okay, so we had a drama. It was right when things were going great for me. I was co-executive producer on Roswell, New Mexico in 2018, and at that time, the Guild started publicly saying they even sent representatives to my show where they talked about it. And immediately, my alarms went off. Something's very wrong here. It wasn't like the first strike where I was like, yeah. They went and they said, there's this practice called packaging, which is essentially a practice that goes back to the 1970s, right? Where the Writers Guild had come to an arrangement, understanding with the agencies that normally the way it works is you work, your agent gets you work, they take 10% of your income, and that's fine. But back in the 70s, some revolutionary thinkers and agencies thought we have a way to make more money for ourselves, which is that we will, package things. Like a writer comes to us with a show, a script, whatever they want to make it a series. We'll put Tom Cruise and Steven Spielberg into the project. We'll package it because we have access. They're our clients. The writer doesn't have those. We have access. We'll put them together and essentially serve like a producer. We'll go to the studio and say, here's all of it. You've got the screenplay, you've got the famous director, famous actor, and that sells the show and gets it on the air. And instead of then charging Tom Cruise and Steven Spielberg and Kamran Pasha 10%, which is decent money, what we're going to do is this. We're going to charge this. We're not going to charge our clients at all, zero, right? But we're going to charge the studio for essentially serving as producers for doing their work for them by putting together all these famous people that sold the show, right? And what we're going to do is instead of 10% of the gross earnings of our clients, we're going to take 1 to 2% of the budget of the show, right? As a fee. So as a producing fee or packaging fee for putting it together. And, that practice was going back to the 70s. And what that did was it certainly made talent agencies richer. For example, the agency that I was with at the time, UTA, United Talent Agency, which is still one of the biggest agencies in Hollywood, they have a stunningly beautiful, massive building complex in Beverly Hills, right next to the Playboy. Playboy publishes out of the next building next door, right? It's a beautiful Beverly Hills building that they own. And that's you look at it, whoever owns this building is doing well, right? So that building was financed by the packaging fee off of Friends. So the agency, which was a smaller agency, had put together a show called Friends, sold to NBC, and got 1 to 2% of this show, which would all go off to make billions of dollars. So they walked away with tens of millions of dollars, probably even maybe close to 100 million when it all came down together. So they financed this massive operation and they became very rich. So you can understand the economic incentive for the agencies at the time. For the writer, the incentive was two things. One is you don't have to pay your 10%, agency, you save money on your agency fee. Plus, this is, if you are Kamran Pasha without a lot of contacts and power, welcome back, RetroNet Girl. We missed you.
I had a power outage, so.
Oh no.
Okay. So we're just talking about the lead up to the strike of 20. My God, what year was it? It was 2020.
2023.
Right? 2019 was the strike, right?
Oh, the first year.
Yeah, the section. So lead up to that, the year before, 2018. And so the incentive for me was, if I'm Kamran Pasha and I'm an unknown guy, I'm not Steven Spielberg, we're best friend, but my agency could put all these people in there. Suddenly I become valuable. The show gets sold. I now am a showrunner. So that's huge incentive for me because I couldn't do it without that, right? So everyone, you would think it's a win-win situation. However, in 2018, leaders of the Writers Guild, and these were all very specific people. These were all people that became rich, became successful showrunners through this packaging system and had become powerful showrunners through it themselves. Then they said, this is unjust. The agents are incentivized now to steal money from our budgets. Like whenever I look at my budget, I see that I have to pay the direct, I have to pay, this license fee, this fee and that fee. And then I have to pay an agency packaging fee that's coming out of my budget, right? That's just wrong. And it's, it's stealing from the client, right? And so they started a campaign where they went out and they sent representatives to my show, Roswell, and they started saying, we're going to end the system. We're going to end it. And we're going to threaten them. I said, how are you going to end this? What do you mean you're going to end this? This is the embedded system for 40 years. It's what makes CAA, William Morris, UTA, all these people rich. Why would they end it? There's no reason for them to end it. And why would I end it? Because I was hoping to take advantage of that to get my show sold. So you can get famous person involved in my show that I don't know. Great. I'm now a showrunner. So I was like, why? But this is unjust. It's, and they were going to end it. And the way they did it was they threatened the agents and said, if you don't agree to end this practice, we will order all of the 10,000 writers in the Writers Guild to fire their agents as leverage and not to have an agent until you agree to get rid of this practice. I'm like, fire my agent? That's literally saying you can't breathe. Like, don't breathe oxygen. The agencies are the circulatory system of Hollywood. There's what keeps everything going.
And can't be in your best interest.
It is in your best interest. And yes, there are abuses. Every client, whether you're an actor or a director or a writer, complains about their agent. My agent's not returning my call. My agent didn't put me up for that project. Everyone does. But it's the devil. It's the devil versus the devil you know. Right. It's like literally It's not even the devil you don't know. I knew that would be a disaster. I knew that what it would do was this. I knew it intuitively because I am a Pakistani Muslim minority guy who doesn't have access to most of these people. And I needed that system to open up doors that weren't opening to me. I'm trying to package my TV shows and they're telling me they're going to get rid of the system. Like, then I'm just another random guy trying to get people to just buy my script. That hasn't worked because they're like, come back to us with a famous person. I don't have those famous people. I needed this system, right? So these were people that were already enriched by this system, decided they wanted to kick the ladder out for everybody underneath them so nobody else could use it because they were already rich from it, right? And I immediately intuited, because I know the psychology of Hollywood and the people I've dealt with, this was consciously or unconsciously an effort to keep the next generation of writers down. So these older writers who were rich were afraid that people like Kamran Pasha are coming, these African-American guys are coming, these people that are not part of our club are coming, young writers are coming, people that are in the system, and they're going to replace us. So best way to make sure they never replace us, they won't have access to the packaging that worked for us, right? I knew that at the time, and I said, this is a disaster. You're trying to screw us. You're actually trying to screw us, right? Because you're going to walk away with your money. Guess what happens? We fired our agents. They literally threatened us. If you don't fire our agents, you're going to be expelled from the guild. They threatened us.
They'll boot you. They'll blacklist you.
Yeah, and then you can't work in this town anymore. That's what they threatened us with. So I didn't fire my agents initially, and I started getting threatening messages by text from other writers.
Wow.
It was like a blacklisting. The other writers, I heard you didn't fire your agent. You know, literally like, we're not going to work with you ever again.
Culture light.
Yeah, it was more cancel culture, big, because they were doing it. It wasn't even light. And the reason I finally end up sending my agent's message, I'm sorry, I don't want to do this, because I held on way past their like, you have to do it. I just didn't do it. I'm sorry, they can't make me do anything, right? They can't legally make me do anything. And then I started getting these personal threatening messages, and I realized, okay, this is it. They're threatening to take my career away from me. So I let go of my agents. And then guess what? Several years go by, the agencies eventually agree to end the packaging system. And what do? It's what I warned. They're like, okay, since we can't, what are they going to do? They're like, oh, we can't make the money. We can't make $100 million off a TV show anymore. Then writers aren't important to us. I'm going to go enter the sports business. So WME started buying sports teams, right? They started buying all these other sources because that's what they're agents. They know how to make money. They're like, I can't make money here. I'll go make money over there. And suddenly the writer goes from being the most important person in television because they're the ones that have the script that gets packaged to just another dude trying to get, please, somebody read my script. Just another sucker. Just another sucker trying to get in. Yeah, just please. And guess who isn't affected? All those people that told us to do it, who were already rich and like, they could call Steven Spielberg on the phone. Hey, Steve, you want to be involved in my project? They don't need packaging because they used it to get to those people. Now I can't access those people. Do you see how that worked, right? So that was a credit. So I was knocked down by this. So my career was damaged by this because I lost my agents. And, I eventually, after a couple of years, was actually able to get a good agency when this whole system was over. Gersh, which was a solid agency, came to represent me. But the world had changed. It didn't matter anymore because now all the projects that I had been packaging were now just me desperately banging on a door. I have a script. Can somebody please read my script? Instead of, them bringing in a hot director attached to the project. Now I'm running around trying to get people to read my script. And the answer always is come back to us with a famous person. That was the packaging system, right? Now I don't have it anymore. So this was the predecessor to the strike. So we've already been knocked down by the system has been broken. And then the strike comes.
Right. So I guess what I was getting at too, and I wanted to hear that story in full because I understood it in pieces, but I understood at least some of the main thrusts, in terms of how that went down, where you might have a good cause. There might be real legitimate reasons behind a strike, but also there's an opportunity for this to become misused in order to empower or actually help a very small group of people. I think Hannah Arendt famously once said it's the revolutionary who becomes the most strict conservative the day after the revolution. They box everybody out.
That's what always happens. The revolution's over. You line up the Red Guard and you shoot them in the back, right? You line up the revolutionaries because that's the actual policy of communist governments. The revolutionaries, you use them, and now they actually want what you thought they were fighting for. Well, you ain't gonna get it because it was just replacing one elite with another elite. The elite's like, now kill these people because they're a problem. So that's what they did. So now that leads to strike. We've already been damaged. I already now know that the Writers Guild is being run by, in my opinion, nefarious people who are just looking after themselves and trying to screw over other writers. And so suddenly,
and this was at a time, that we've been chronicling in these discussions the culture war. that's involved in Hollywood, at Disney, at Lucasfilm, and I have argued that Disney has been a flagship epicenter of this culture war, and that Lucasfilm has also almost independently, even though they're within, Lucasfilm's within Disney, they've acted independently, in my opinion, but they're both flagship epicenters for this culture war. I think Miss Kennedy was really on the side of feminism, or I think they call it third or fourth wave feminism.
Well, fourth wave feminism. I don't know that she was on the side of or first wave feminism or so whatever. But yeah. So let's just talk, because I don't have tremendous amount. We have about 20 minutes left. So I was going to talk about to set up to bring us back to Lucasfilm. So now the industry has been severely damaged. It's been upended. Writers are no longer at the core of the industry as they were, right? And then on top of that, we have the pandemic and the extreme reactions to it in Hollywood, right? And how they how they, in my opinion, mismanaged the restrictions here very extremely, right? Making it even more difficult to film than even was necessary, even by their belief of what the threat was, right? Whatever. So the industry's been hit by the firing of agents, then the pandemic and lockdowns and those rules. And now, so people are now desperate. They're out of the game. They're trying to work. They don't have work. And then suddenly we start getting this thing, we're really unhappy with our agreement. It's time for a strike. I'm like, you jerk offs, you just knocked us down twice. You're going to do a strike on top of that? And the strike was, again, presented as always in the means of, this is in your interest because AI is coming, right? And I looked at the actual Writers Guild current agreement, the one that existed before and it pretty much stated, because it said AI will replace you as writer. This, aside from that, the idea is stupid. The AI could ever create something like The Sixth Sense. It can't, right? And so, but that was the threat they were giving, that you'll be replaced by AI. I said, well, the problem is this. We already had, by the time the strike was coming, the courts had already ruled that AI material was not copyrightable, right? So I was like, if the studio were to, let's say, create an AI to just write a screenplay instead of hiring Kamran, well, their script isn't copyrightable. Anybody can use that script, right? Huh. So that was already determined by the courts. The federal courts had determined that before the strike began. So I said, so what's the threat here? They're never going to use something that they don't control the copyright on, right? They're never going to use it. And also the Writers Guild agreement before the strike had stated in the language of the pre-existing agreement that any script in the system had to be attributed to a Writers Guild member. There are no AI members of the Writers Guild. Some human being had to be attributed as the writer of the script, right? Even if you got the script written by AI, some person has to be given credit for it and be paid under the guild. Even if they didn't write one word of it, you have to put a human being's name on it. That's always already. So we're going to strike over this, and then once we struck over that, right? And I knew they were lying because I knew that wasn't the real reason, right? And then the real reason comes out. The real reason suddenly became the thing that we were fighting for was this whole thing that, more and more writers, as Netflix and other streaming shows have come, when I worked on Bionic Woman, there must have been 15 writers on that show, right? And now you're getting to a place, there were shows like, like The White Lotus, where Mike White or whatever, these guys just have like one person writing the whole show, right? And that was happening more and more. Vikings was one guy writing all of Vikings, all those seasons, one person, right? And that was how a lot of of these streamers were doing things. And so they were saying, but still, there were still a lot of shows with 5, 10, 15 writers. But they're saying the trend. Remember, they talk about the trend, the future, like as if these guys can see the future. I can see the future. I see the disaster. Right? The trend is, in a few years, unless we force them to put a minimum number of writers they have to hire, it's just going to be one person on every show, and most people are not going to be working. I said, basic economics is this. Once you establish price controls, that you have to have a minimum number of writers, what's going to happen is people will then reduce the maximum down to that minimum, right? I said, that's what's going to happen. So right now they can hire anywhere from 1 to 100 writers on a show or more, right? But once you tell them they have to hire 3, 4, or 5, that's all they're going to hire. Because you're giving them a target number, right? And so we fought for this, and I didn't participate in the strike at all. I refused to go to the picket line. I knew it was a sham. I said, I'm out. I'm not part. You forced me to do this. I'm out. I'm not participating. And then the moment that we got the agreement and it was agreed to, so I had a friend who's a mentee, Native American woman, And she was always like, Cameron, you just believe all these conspiracy theories about the Writers Guild, and they have our best interest at heart. She's out there picketing, whatever. So when it was over and I read what was agreed to, I laughed because I knew my warning had come true. A few minutes later, my very smart mentee called me and said, she read the document. She said, what the hell is this? Because what it was, they told them, this is our way to guarantee young writers a chance at the show. But the only people that were guaranteed slots in the minimum guaranteed were older writers, producer level and above. You can make a show with 5 producers and not a single young staff writer. That, of course, because they're protecting themselves. They're not trying to help anybody at the bottom of the tier. I said the whole system is protect themselves, not to help these young people that will take their jobs in 5 years. They had to get rid of those people, right? So she said, what is this? We fought for this. I said, yeah, now you realize you're a sucker, right? And then what happened is within 3 days of us signing that agreement, it was like November of the year, right? Within 3 days, the CW, which was in those days still existed as a real network, it announced within 3 days, it announced that the shows that were coming back, now that the strike was over, were going to be cut in writing staffs. So all the shows that include All American, and I think included Superman and Lois, others, they went from 10 writers down to the minimum 5. Because they're like, well, you're telling us, the writers are telling us we just need 5 writers. So why are we paying for 10? Which is what I said was going to happen. My friend,
like they're overhiring.
Yeah, my friend who's working at CBS, it was, I believe, I'm trying to remember which of the CBS shows it was. I think it was SEAL Team. It was one of those shows, right? Actually, no, it wasn't. I think it also happened on SEAL Team. It actually happened to 2 friends. But another friend that's working on NCIS, which is the biggest show in the world. NCIS, NCIS is the biggest, public television show in the world, right? And so it took a few months later, my friend who was number 2 on the show was let go. The entire 15-person staff of NCIS, which has all the money in the world, fired the entire staff. Who were the 5 people minimum left? Were the 5 original writers from 20 years ago. They kept the job for themselves. All the young people were eliminated. On a show that doesn't need to cut because it's got so much money coming in as the number 1 broadcast show in the world. But they did that because that's human psychology and basic economics. So I said, okay, you just destroyed a generation of young writers, literally a generation of young writers. There's no way for these young writers now to advance. It doesn't exist. It's not actually possible.
Cameron, according to Vox, writers won big.
Well, what's the date on this?
November. This is when the strike ended. They're like, it's over.
A few days later.
Writers
You should pull up the subsequent articles that came over the next year, 2 years. The articles were like, hey, this kind of isn't working out for writers. There's even fewer jobs than there were before the strike. Ooh, duh. What? I mean, it's just like, that's what I said was going to happen. But again, where the unions are now, where my union is just the richest people at the top, afraid, who are in their 50s and 60s, and they're afraid of young people, minorities coming in and taking their jobs. So they destroyed every single possible way that a younger generation writer, they took away packaging, they destroyed the shows through the extreme lockdowns, and then they created this minimum writing staff that only protects older established writers, right? They did everything they could to make sure nobody could take their jobs from them and replace them with the next younger model, which is always the fear of these older writers, right? I mean, that's a conspiracy. When everything you do keeps achieving that objective, that's not unconscious. That's a conspiracy.
It reminds me of that South Park episode where Canada goes on strike, and in the end, he's like, we got these vouchers for Bennigan's, and we got some bubble gum. And the next guy, the assistant starts clapping. Yeah, where they do this terrible thing, and they all pay a big price, and nobody wins. Like, nobody really wins except a small amount of people who seem to be the ones behind the strike in the first place. So it's almost like they literally are using the strike against the people that they're supposedly protecting in these endeavors.
Well, I mean, so now going back to Lucasfilm, we are now coming into a world that's also, so Jon Favreau is now dealing with an incredibly damaged world where he can't even get writers anymore, right? And so in that environment, we're getting shows being created to the best of their ability that maybe don't have the best possible writers because you're all being restricted now, right?
I remember they couldn't even do interviews. Like, the writers couldn't say what the show was about. There was this bit. it was really bizarre, and I think it affected like even how trailers were made, and so like there were some unexpected, and unintended consequences to this that affected even PR lead ups just to kind of keep the stove hot. They couldn't even do that. So this was one of the worst time strikes perhaps in history, coming off the heels of COVID. Then you have the writers go on strike, and
and then yeah, it all destroys everything. So now people are like, Disney sucks. I'm like, dude, Disney don't have writers no more. This was the whole system was shot in the head 3 times in a row.
Yeah, execution style.
Execution style. It's not even a double tap; it's a triple tap, right?
Well, and John Q. Public is already, and I would consider myself part of that. Like I might be a writer, but I'm not a professional writer like you are. I'm not in the industry. I'm still very much an outsider. So I'm more of still your audience, right? I'm an audience member. I'm a fan, and to us out here, it's like we're losing interest in this. When I was a kid, you would dream of, like, I think Lance, I dreamt of doing a Boba Fett show. I would dream of being a screenwriter and all that. And now it's like, boy, who wants to bother? Who wants in on this? Like, and not only that, that's on the professional side. Just from the fan side, the fans aren't happy with the content coming out. It's not like it's high quality content.
So there's something like 20%. Yeah. Well, but you're trapped. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Doug. I've talked over you. I apologize. I get enthusiastic.
This was just my main point.
Now. This makes it very hard for good stuff to come, because now 20% of the previous level of writers is working, right? And as a result, guess what? People are leaving. If you don't work for 2 or 3 years and there's no sign of any work, you just give up. So people are leaving, and you're left with these old dudes who are going to play this out for another 10 years before they're too old to do it themselves. And then what do you got? What do you got? The young people are gone. The old people are going to die out. They've set up a system that I don't know how it's going to survive. I don't know.
See, I think there will, and I don't even know if I know what I'm talking about. This is just a completely uneducated hunch. I do believe there's going to be a demand for writers in the future as the system churns out what I'm calling unpop culture. It's gone from a system that created culture, we're here because we fell in love with stuff like Terminator and Aliens and Star Wars and Star Trek, and it affected us so profoundly that it became part of our identity, became part of our passion. It helped push us into a direction where we wanted to spend and devote our energy and passions writing or producing or doing something creative. And now it's like they're creating unpop culture. This is not stuff that inspires people. This is stuff that turns people off. This is stuff that is off-putting. This is stuff that makes people turn away from the industry and go find something else to do. Maybe I can go play a video game or play baseball or just do something else, because there's nothing here worth anything. So what I think is, as unpop culture takes hold, and it is in this year, in 2023, that we're covering, and it will persist, as pop culture has taken hold as like, you will like this or else, I think there's going to be a pent-up demand for good quality writing again somewhere, even if it has to come from an independent, like the indie world. Remember that the 90s had a big indie revolution that helped revitalize the industry.
Yeah, it will. I mean, what you're going to see is a breakdown of the system. You're going to see a breakdown of the system. It's coming. It is coming. Also because in this current environment, not only everything that I've described just hits everyone across the board. Hollywood is still very sensitive to being blackmailed by extreme social issues, right? So, if you tweeted out something that people don't like, you'll be canceled. You'll still be canceled, right? Just people don't want to deal with it. Even though Hollywood is now past that conversation, but if you get hired for a job or something, someone can send like a screenshot of something you wrote or anything that can be used against you, and the person like, I shouldn't hire this guy. And I'm hearing that it's happening. So great writers are being still blackballed because of something they wrote on Twitter 6 years ago, right? And so that's going to exclude even more people. Again, and the funny thing is Hollywood is now past that. Hollywood is now trying to make stuff for the mainstream population, but it's the writers that were more in touch with the mainstream were already canceled. They're already canceled, and it's hard to bring them back in, because then you're like, did you bring an anti-trans person back in? Didn't they say this thing, in 2016, right? That sounded bad, right? About J.K. Rowling, they supported her, whatever it was, right? And so that's the people that are doing it are making sure that there's nothing left except themselves, and they ain't the best of the crop, right? So,
well, like you said though, I have a certain belief in value. Value is valuable, and people. I remember even with college sports, they're like, oh, you can't pay these guys. I'm like, but they're valuable. Value find. I feel like Jeff Goldblum in Jurassic Park. Human value. It finds a way. Somewhere, somehow, it rises up. There's demand for it, and if someone could do something that's valuable, usually in America, it finds a way to the forefront. It's undue stimulus usually that pushes it away or keeps it down, and that's what you want to get rid of, is that undue stimulus. You want talent to be put in the right place, and I feel like for years Hollywood has been, it had a reputation, that talented people do end up there, and if you had talent that you might
but it's not going to be there for a while. I think there is some talent left in the pool of survivors, but the pool is getting smaller. And so and we should probably, I only have about maybe 6 or 7 more minutes, so we should probably bring it back to Lucasfilm. But that's what Lucasfilm is facing, right? After the greatest damage that Kathleen Kennedy is going to do after she leaves is that Lucasfilm will be hard put to find good writers to keep the system going, because most of them haven't survived what's happened the last 5 years. They just haven't. Most of my friends have given up. My friends have moved to Phoenix, they moved to Florida, they moved to Texas. They're out, right? They're out. So these are all talented people that just couldn't survive all the gunshots to the head. And these are people that Lucasfilm won't be able to hire. And so what do you got? You survived the people that played along.
But Lucasfilm was part of the problem. They helped foster this atmosphere. They helped foster this attitude. They helped cultivate it. Disney helped cultivate it. So they created a system that essentially annihilated the value, the sources of value in creative projects, and that's the worst thing you could have. And it shows, I think, is my point. It shows the quality of these projects. Mandalorian season 3. It shows that there was something else at work instead of creativity and talent and great writing and real true inspiration and the strong spirit of Star Wars.
What we're seeing is, look, this was just Red Guard stuff. This is just we've been through essentially a cultural revolution in Hollywood, a literal cultural revolution where Maoists took over, right? Financed by the richest, most out of touch people in this town who wanted to feel progressive and feel good about their hidden racism and all this stuff by pretending to care about things that they don't care about, right? And then policing speech and other stuff to do that. And so now, Lucasfilm has been shattered by it, which kind of brings us back to where we were. So, it's
Cameron, If you could hold on for 1 second, I want to cover one thing quickly, and then I wanted you to give just brief commentary on the snub. We'll get to it here in a second. Real quick, and then Retro, you and I will get in. We'll get real deep in some of these other things coming up.
And I'm sorry I won't be here for much longer, but I got to deal with this. So.
Okay. So, real quick, Retro, the Disney does release one thing. Lucasfilm does release one thing. It was a small thing. It kind of went under the radar. I did not. I saw season 1. I liked about 3 episodes. I did not like the rest, and I hated some of them. But it was a mixed bag, I would say. I did not watch season 2 yet. You are kind of a fan of Visions. Am I right?
Oh yeah, I love it. It is a chance to see what other countries would do with very short stories of in the Star Wars universe, and their style that they would use to kind of depict it. And it was very interesting. It's kind of like seeing, I don't know if you guys remember in the 70s, there were so many like rip-off Star Wars movies.
Yeah.
And, it was kind of...
Battlestar Galactica was that. Battlestar Galactica was a Star Wars rip-off movie that became a series.
Yes, but I mean, they had a good story. Some of these weren't really that great of stories. But this is sort of like seeing like an Indian version of a Star Wars Jedi story. It was like one of them was set in Africa, another one a French one that was really, really good. And it was just another offering, and it was bite-sized. They didn't spend a lot of money on it. It was low risk, and I love these kinds of small experimental things. And it didn't need to be 8 seasons, right? It's just one-off little stories put together in vignettes, and it was lovely.
Well, and I'll say this, I think this is a good idea. Even I haven't seen season 2, so I can't say if it's good or bad on my end. But $15 million to produce the entire season, that's a pretty low amount of money.
Great.
For Lucasfilm. And so this is where you can have fun with it. This is where you can be experimental. And I think that overall, this is a good idea. This is something I wouldn't mind seeing more of out of Lucasfilm, because I feel like they did take a little bit of a creative chance here.
Yes.
So
Yes.
and they didn't break the bank doing it. So to me, that makes a lot of sense. So this came out May 4th, which is Star Wars Day in 2023. And this, I would say, is much more of a quiet show.
Yes.
However, as quiet as the show was, we have a doozy coming through the pipeline out of Lucasfilm. Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny should have never been made. I don't know who was clamoring for this, but Kennedy kind of insisted that this movie get made. And before the movie comes out, this is what I wanted Cameron to comment on briefly before he has to go. There is a premiere, and I remember watching footage of this, and I thought this was profound. So remember, this is the year of rebellion. This is where people are starting to push back. Big things are happening against Disney, against Lucasfilm. And so we have the premiere of Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. And who's attending this premiere? You have George Lucas. You have Steven Spielberg, who was involved in Raiders of the Lost Ark. You have Harrison Ford. Kathleen Kennedy is in. Frank Marshall is in attendance.
John Williams
on the left. Right. So this is, to me, this is the all-star team of my childhood, to be honest. They're all there for this premiere for Dial of Destiny. And Steven Spielberg is giving us a presentation here. And it's very interesting because I'll never forget how he does it. And I watched it over and over again because it was very clear to me that this was intentional. This is how I read it. Steven Spielberg is up there and he is giving kind of an intro. And behind them is this like screen, right? And he's like, I want to introduce some people that are very, very important. He goes, and he stresses the word creator. The creator is Mr. George Lucas. And that made me perk up because I have a private belief that there is always kind of a secret ongoing war between creative and non-creative people.
Sure,
and
there
I think
is.
There's a war out there, and there's different profiles and ways that this war manifests. So people who really do enjoy the creation process are on the side of creators. That tends to be. So when he started hammering home this idea that the creator of Indiana Jones, George Lucas, I perked up. I was like, he's making a point here. And then he goes, and everyone claps and everything, and then he shakes Lucas's hand, and then you've got Frank Marshall and Kathleen Kennedy standing next. They're married. They're standing there, and Steven Spielberg goes, and now the person, the glue, who holds it all together. And Kathleen Kennedy is getting ready to be introduced. She looks down, and she's.
I know. Again, now that's Frank Marshall as well. He literally turns and puts his chest out and ready for the accolade, right?
Yeah, so it seems just inevitable.
As he said, this is the person that has been through with us from the beginning, which Frank Marshall and Kathleen Kennedy were from the beginning, right?
They were there from the beginning. I was shocked to see Kathleen Kennedy's name in the credits for Jaws. So anyway, so he's like, everyone, even myself included, watching this, I'm prepared for him to introduce Kathleen Kennedy, and then he goes, John Williams. and the back curtain starts going up, and there's an orchestra there, and John Williams is there, and he starts playing music from.
And both Kathleen Kennedy whirl in shock to look, and Frank Marshall's look is like, but he's like, he still has some dignity, so he sort of like gently claps, and Kennedy just standing there because she clapped for George Lucas, she clapped for Harrison Ford, and she's standing there fuming, not clapping, and just enraged because this is a public snub of the two producers that have been with this franchise since the early 80s. And right? Yes, John Williams, God bless him, is important, but to not acknowledge the two producers who produced all of the movies. I mean, when you win an Oscar, it's the producer that gets it, not the musical composer, right? To not even acknowledge the producer, I mean, it was shocking.
And so Cameron just said Kathleen Kennedy is kind of, they're stunned. They were expecting to be announced, and now this moment has passed. It has moved on to John Williams, and Frank Marshall grabs Kathleen Kennedy, goes, "Come on, let's go," and he storms off the stage. So his reaction showed me he knew it was a snub. He knew it was a snub. He wasn't going to stand there for it. And he's like, you can read his lips.
Yeah, he didn't. Everyone else is going up and congratulating John Williams. Everyone on the stage. He literally storms off, and then Kathleen Kennedy grabs Lucas's arm and pulls him out like against his will. She pulls him off stage.
Yeah,
like this elderly man.
Well, to me, it was very rewarding because I was like, it was rewarding on a certain level. I'm not happy when someone gets snubbed necessarily, but I felt like this was deserved. This was earned. And I was happy also that here's now Steven Spielberg. He's not involved with Lucasfilm anymore. He hasn't been part of this whole sequel, but he's one of my childhood, idols. Someone I looked up to, and here he is coming in from the outside, and he's like, the creator gets the credit, and he's also acknowledging John Williams, one of the greatest composers possibly in film history, and doesn't acknowledge Kathleen Kennedy. So I was like, Spielberg's on our side. He's on our side. Was that?
No, yeah, and there was a twinkle in his eyes. He did it. Like there was a twinkle in his eye, big smile. He knew what he was doing. They're standing right next to him. John Williams is behind the curtain. He knows what he's seeing, their bodily reactions as they prepare for the praise. You could at least, you could at least acknowledge them before going to Williams. He's doing this on purpose. This isn't normal.
Right.
This is, and anyone with a brain will realize this is an intentional public snub meant to send a message that you are out. Right.
I agree.
And the looks on their faces show that.
I agree. And what he was saying leading up to that they complimenting George Lucas for being the visionary, the creator. He obviously placed a great premium on those qualities in a person.
Right. And you would think the producers would have had those qualities. They're the producers. You would think. You would think he would praise them.
But the producer's a different skill set too. It's not that they're fundamentally non-creative. There are very
a good producer is able to give good notes on a script. That should be what they're doing, along with all the business stuff, right? A producer is it should be a creative role. It's a business and creative role. That's why they're the ones that win the Oscar, because they're the ones that manage to do the business and creative side to pull it off.
And it's a skill set. So I'm not taking anything away from producers. It is a tough skill set. But obviously, in this moment, it was an acknowledgement to George Lucas, the creative force behind Indiana Jones, and also to John Williams, the creative force behind the music.
And Harrison Ford, right? The actor. But with respect to John Williams is a visionary. I don't know that he needed to be singled out at this moment. Like he's done great music.
I think respectfully, they should have at least been mentioned and given their due for being a part of the entire series. Even though, but it's a definite message that you get there. Like
you can see it. It's an insult. It's an insult. Yeah. It is an intentional insult, and it is done in public with people who are able to watch it on YouTube. And that was the message, because guess what? Ms. Kennedy had pushed it too far.
Right.
She pushed it too far. And remember, Spielberg left this movie. Spielberg was supposed to direct this movie. He left.
I didn't know that.
Yes, you can go back and find it. Look it up. Spielberg left this movie. And then they had to bring on so something went wrong for him to leave. He's directed all the other movies. Why did he leave this movie that was being produced by her? Something happened. Now you understand. There's some reason that he walked off and just took a producer credit.
Oh, makes sense now. It makes sense now.
But to me,
he had some personal problem with how this movie was produced, so he insulted them.
Well, and to me, this is all part of what I believe is the rebellion. This is a rebellion. It is now affecting the professional class, because there's a certain professional courtesy, right? Like Retro saying, but now we're not seeing that courtesy given. We're seeing Nelson Peltz trying to attack it on the corporate side. We see Karen McCarthy coming in with lawsuits based on the behavior of Lucasfilm. Yeah. We see Steven Spielberg snub Miss Kennedy at a very prominent premiere. And by the way, a premiere, Cameron, am I right? It's a professional event.
Yes.
The top executives of Disney were there. The heads of the studio were there. They're in the audience watching this person be humiliated. You think random people like us are noticing it? You don't think the studio executives, the people running the studio at Disney, everybody except Iger was there. Literally everybody except Iger was there, to my knowledge. And they got the message. They got the message that this person has no power. Ignore this person. And with that, my friends, I have to go deal with other things. Please, everyone, stick around here. Doug and Retro Nerd are going to continue. Thank you for having me on. And hopefully I can come back in for the final episode of this.
Yes, next week should be our final episode, and we got some juicy stuff, Cameron, and we can wrap it up. We can put the final word on it.
All right. Yeah. God bless everyone, and stick around here, and we'll continue. Take care. Bye-bye.
All right, Cameron, take it easy. Well, that was excellent. Cameron always provides great commentary. And as an insider, he has some very unique and what I think is important perspective to add to this as we try to understand what happened with all of this.
Yes,
So
I did not know that he was a part of the project, so that's
yeah,
very cool to
well,
get, that information.
well, in retro, now you and I get to get into it here. We're going to be watching Temple of Doom this weekend. So
Yes.
here we get to finally add some commentary to um, the next big thing coming out of Lucasfilm. So that was the premiere, and now, my friends,
Ah,
Indy 5, a movie that nobody asked for, coming
yeah,
off the cuff of Indy 4, the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, which was not well received. It was not a very good movie, to be honest.
no.
Um, and now we have Indy 5. I thought he looked old in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. I remember there was a few shots of him like whipping he looked slow, and I was like, ooh, this is like
Tough times.
15 years later,
Yeah.
you know? Um, so let's get into it here. Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny retro.
Mhm.
Were you excited about this movie?
No.
What?
Uh, for me, the first 3 movies are excellent movies. Um, Even if you had complaints about any of those 3, they're so minor. I think the first movie, Raiders of the Ark, Lost Ark, it is a perfect action movie.
It's a classic.
And yeah, and Crusade was amazing. So, Crystal Skull is um is not my favorite. There's some moments that are just straight up eye rolling, but it it really took me out of the franchise. But it wasn't the worst idea ever. I was like, okay, well, I could get into this scene and that scene, but not so much this scene. There were moments. Oh, Karen Allen, I love her so
There
much.
was one thing that I don't care what anyone says. There was one thing about Kingdom of the Crystal Skull that I was so grateful for. And
Yes.
it's like it's part of my headcanon, and it's like there's like a through line with Marion Ravenwood coming back into the story,
Oh, yeah.
and I couldn't be happier to see.
Yes.
And look at that big old, megawatt smile that she had. She had some of her swagger from Raiders of the Lost Ark, and out of all of Indy's love interests,
Yes.
this was the one that I liked the most by far.
Me too. She was so sweet. And the backstory, they met when they were, she was a young, little girl and fell in love with him. And this is an enduring love to last a lifetime. So imagine my shock and dismay to find out she was not going to be in the 5.
Right. So the
So
one
that was part of the problem right
Right, yeah.
there.
The one pure gold vein in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull was Marion Ravenwood. That they
Yeah.
got back together, that she was back into the just the fact that
Yes.
she had returned to the franchise was good enough for me. The fact that they didn't just bring her in. She had like a prominent role in it. She
Yes.
got into some fights. She had some action sequences, and the movie ended with them getting married. Say what
Yes.
you want about the rest of the film, and I'll say it too because I didn't like it, but I loved the Marion Ravenwood thing. So to think that we jump back into Dial of Destiny, and one of the first things they give us is the fact that Marion Ravenwood is out. They got a divorce, and now we're going to catch up with Indiana Jones in the 60s.
Okay. Well, I didn't make the movie. Uh, I was thinking about it. I was like, okay, well, maybe I'll try it. And one look at the trailer, and I knew it was going to be hot garbage. And I sometimes like hot garbage. I will be honest. Like I don't, I can watch the silliest things, but I was like, okay, no. When saw they were using a lot of CGI, but one particular shot that really got me was he was on a horse, and then the head was kind of like hovering in space.
Oh, let me see if I can find that.
It was just so uncanny, and I was like, "You're passing this off as real film? That's insulting." The guys on YouTube can actually do a better job at
Which is amazing.
recreating this kind of a scene. So it was heartbreaking to see that they had dragged poor Harrison Ford out for another outing, and it just didn't look good. None of the special effects really look good to me. And this is Lucasfilm, right? And they're going to be with Industrial Light Magic, they're the best of the best of the best.
Right.
So what happened? Just visually from the trailer. And so I haven't seen it yet. I may see it, just to get the context of everything. And I'm not a hyperbolic person who's like, oh, but the trailer did it no favors. So I don't know what this movie is really, if it's good or not. According to everyone that I've heard do reviews, it's not.
Well, I
According to
watched
that.
the first 20 minutes of it, and which I was told was good actually. So I was like, I'll watch the good part, right? And it wasn't even that good. And let me be more blunt. It doesn't hold up to the rest of the Indiana Jones story. So I was told that the de-aging. I did not think the de-aging looked very good. And I actually, if it did anything, it encouraged me. It got me excited to go back and watch the old stuff again. So I rewatched Raiders of the Lost Ark,
Yes,
which is my favorite.
it's great.
I went back and I rewatched Temple of Doom, which I thought wasn't my favorite, but I freaking loved it. Upon rewatch, and I can't wait to watch it again with you.
Oh, yes.
I could not believe the wall-to-wall action in that
Yes.
movie.
Oh.
It was so entertaining. Like, I forgot how entertaining Temple of Doom is. It is a blast.
Yeah, I call it a roller coaster ride because
it is so good, and it's oddly, it's like Indiana Jones in his prime. So Raiders of the Lost Ark was like the origin story for us, and it wasn't a pure origin story because he's already fully formed, but it's our origin story. We get to see this character for the first time. He's a professor who moonlights as this swashbuckling international adventurer who goes into the high-profile, high-stakes artifact situation, against the Nazis, against the regimes of the world, the evil regime, and here he is. In a way, what was it, 1984? That Temple of Doom came out. Is that right?
Yeah. Yes, 1984.
Okay. So 1984, and arguably, I would say it's Harrison Ford in his prime. It's post. He is.
Oh, he was fantastic.
He is unbelievable in it. He is awesome in it, and he does some incredible stunts in it. And some of the stunts were just as crazy as what I saw in Raiders of the Lost Ark. And then they capped it off, in my opinion, with The Last Crusade, which, by the way, it's like perfect storytelling.
Yes.
It may not have the roller coaster of Temple of Doom. It may not have the pure classicism of Raiders of the Lost Ark, but it is a worthy end to what I believe the Indiana Jones trilogy. It's a worthy end. It's a great story. It's got a great soundtrack, and it's awesome. And Sean Connery absolutely elevated and added to the lore.
Right.
So that was the trilogy, and then out comes Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, and it was missing, but it had Marion Ravenwood. It did some things.
Yes,
that I
yes,
didn't
it did
mind.
some things, yeah.
It
And
did
it
some
wasn't
things
it
that I
wasn't
didn't
a bad story. I think the execution and just a few choices was just a little off.
It was.
Yeah, but
And
the story was pretty intriguing.
Right. Well, you could have made Ancient Aliens interesting. Like there is some pent up demand for it. Whether or not it belongs in Indiana Jones, who knows? And I won't even get into you could have made Ancient Aliens work. With an archaeologist, you could do it, but I think it was a little bit of a misfire, and ultimately it left fans saying, South Park famously made fun of it, and so no one really wanted an Indy 5. So when Kathleen Kennedy announced it, people were like, what? No, it was very ambivalent, and she willed this thing through. And let me tell you, folks, this movie wasn't cheap. They spent some bucks on it. $387.2 million to make this film that nobody wanted. And they also cast Phoebe Waller-Bridge. Go ahead, Retro.
And I think she was probably excited to do it because, probably a little personal revenge for many years working under, other people, and now she gets to be the boss. And it's Indiana Jones, household name, and it was probably considered at the time she was thinking of it an easy win. And And other people, probably like me, if somebody said you could make Indiana, an Indiana Jones movie, I would say how, but still, if it worked, it would be a big win. And that was the problem, was the how or will you make this movie? And they didn't quite nail it, because Harrison Ford has said over and over again, he is the only one who will play Indiana Jones. So that's the challenge number one. So if you are going to continue on with the series, you have to name it something else, and you'll have to hand it off to somebody else. Naturally, we thought Mutt was going to get it, right? His son.
Shia LaBeouf.
And okay, well, things aren't working with Shia LaBeouf. At the time, he was maybe canceled, or he was having some, he's very picky about the things he works on. Recast him, different actor.
Yeah.
And that
Or
might
just
have
don't make
worked.
this movie.
Just don't make this one with Harrison Ford in the condition that he's in, and then try to pretend, oh, we'll just age him, and that's going to work, because there's still some things carrying over from just the clips that I saw of him being an elderly man. And that doesn't sell me as like, oh, that's Indiana Jones in his prime,
Well, so you're right. You have old Indy, which really, I don't think anyone really wants to see that. Think about old Sean Connery in The Last Crusade. He wasn't doing all the swashbuckling stuff. He was
exactly.
Now, I love Sean Connery in Last Crusade. He was, in retrospect, I was like, oh my God, home run. They hit a home run with who they're going to cast for Indiana Jones' father.
Yes.
Henry Jones Jr.'s Sean Connery. And now that the actor has passed on, God rest his soul, when I watch it, I was like, Sean Connery is Indy's dad. I was like,
right?
What a win. What a win. So they just scored. But old Henry Jones Jr., Henry Jones Sr., he didn't have the big adventure, right? He was kind of like the reluctant sidekick to his son. He had some of his great moves were played for laughs, effectively so, by the way.
Yes.
I find this situation presents itself. And then when he does the birds on the beach and knocks out one of the Nazi warplanes, he's like, I remembered my Charlemagne. So he had to be resourceful.
Yes.
And also not happy. I remember there's this one scene where Indy's doing all this great stuff, and he looks over at his dad, and his dad's like fixing his watch, not too happy with his son's heroic behavior. Perfect. So we don't get the contrast here. We don't know who this character is. Phoebe Waller-Bridge, I don't know who her character is, and I didn't want to know. I wasn't excited about I don't have anything against the actress necessarily, but I wasn't really thrilled about her being cast. She was a new character. I thought we kind of figured out it was going to be Mary. It should have just ended, right? So here we have an aging Indy without the charm, I would say, to play the contrasting charm of Sean Connery with the heroics of Indy. Now we got this other person, and remember what I said about lead checking? It's a form of putting women into a franchise, a pre-existing franchise. You put her in there to lead check. She's there to check the lead, like Bo-Katan did in Mandalorian season 3, which we were talking about. Here we have a lead check. She comes in and she's kind of putting him in check over and over again. And that was, so old Indy was strike one. I didn't really want to see him like that. Strike two was Marion being removed. I saw the divorce papers in the trailer, and I was like,
no.
The only good thing about Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, you just undid it. It's like killing Newton Hicks in the first minutes of Alien. I was like, so that's strike two. And then they cast her a lead check on Indy. I was like, you know what? I think that's it. I too, like you, protested. It wasn't a hard protest. It wasn't like I won't see this movie.
Just
I don't care about this movie. It was empathy.
Just didn't feel like going to support the a movie franchise that you have regarded so very deeply and care so very much. It's brought me so much joy since I was a child. I mean, all three of those movies that we noted that were really the best of them were, I mean, hours and hours of time spent watching those movies and, really loving the character of Indy. To see him basically fizzle out like this, it is just pretty pathetic, especially once another piece of it was a lot of people complained about his character not seeming as indie as it should be. Like he had lost something, he was depressed, and they Lucified him or Obi-Wan him, like in the beginning of Obi-Wan, where he's like depressed and he's got to get his mojo back. It's just sort of like, Indiana Jones is always Indiana Jones. What's changes is how he gets the job done and the challenges he faces. That's what
Well,
changes. That's a
well,
hero.
and I think it has to be said in terms of the fandom. What is the trust level with Kathleen Kennedy handling a legacy character like Luke Skywalker?
Yes.
Our last image of Luke, we saw him in Return of the Last Jedi. Just terrible
Vanishing.
imagery.
Vanishing out of the screen, off screen. It's like, where's my hero that we've cared about since 1977? He's gone.
Totally. Yeah. So the trust was low to think that she was going to handle Indy. And now, from what I heard, following a lot of the discussion, and some of it was just rumor mill, some of it was confirmed. There were some reshoots on this that they toned it down. They dialed down the dial of destiny. I guess it was worse than it was in
Okay.
terms of the way it might offend the fandom. And I heard they toned it down a little bit, but I saw it even in the preview. She punches him in the face, and I was like, you know what? I just don't know. This just isn't whoever you're trying to appeal to. Hopefully, they come and see your movie. Is what I was thinking, because I was like, you're just not appealing to me. And you don't have to. It's not like I'm over here like pounding, but you have to appeal to me. You don't. You don't have to appeal to me. It doesn't even mean that I won't like it. There are movies that are not meant for me that I end up liking.
Yeah.
But this wasn't one of them. So my question, and let me ask you, who is this movie made for? Who was the target demographic?
The
Who do you
target
think they were targeting?
demographic was, I think, according from what I could tell from what people have told me about the movie, I didn't see it, and that it is for maybe pubescent girls to have someone to admire in the secondary character. Maybe like, oh, a strong woman, a strong female character, there she is. Like, we never had any. Like, we have always had strong female characters since the beginning of film, because that is just strong female characters have always existed. It's not just like showing up and punching everybody or being a hero in the sense that a lot of masculine figures have done it. There have been other strong feminine heroes, and so this is sort of one of those things where, oh, we don't have to show the conventional female, and we don't have to show Indiana Jones. He's not so great. This new girl is on the block is much better. The old, out with the old and in with the new, all that. It really wasn't supposed to be for fans from the 1981, from way back in 1981, or had followed all of the movies from the 70s and 80s and 90s. Like, we don't count because we're too
Well, we didn't
old.
show up ultimately. Let me
Yeah.
show you something. Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny is one of the biggest flops of all time in terms of loss of money. So this is a list I highlighted. Just look at how many recent shows are on this list. So Hollywood, remember I was about unpop culture? Well,
Yes.
here you go. Look at these films. Wish in 2023, which that's the year we're in covering now, is on this list. Dark Phoenix is on this list. Moonfall is on this list. Mulan, which came out during COVID. Indiana Jones, an Indiana Jones movie is on this list. Jungle Cruise, The Flash, Turning Red, Strange World, Joker, Folie à Deux, and The Marvels. Notice a lot of these ones I highlighted came out just in the last couple of years that we're covering.
Yes.
I can forgive Mulan. And
That was
that's it.
another misstep. That was when Disney was really trying to appeal to China a lot more, and China had,
Well, I'm not forgiving it for those reasons. I'm
they were
forgiving
not
it for
buying it.
it came out during COVID.
Yeah,
So what I'm
yeah.
saying is
COVID
in
also
terms
had a
of
big part of it.
right, yeah. In terms of it being a box office flop, I'm more forgiving of Mulan
Yeah,
because the theaters
they
weren't
had a
full.
lot. Yeah,
That
they had
one
a lot of.
aside, there's no excuse for all of these. Look, 2023 alone, one, two,
2, 3,
three, four
4. Oh,
are on
wow.
there.
Yeah.
So the year before, one, two, three are on there. 2019. So I mean, way to go, guys! You're just you're spending money to create movies that nobody wants to go see. And
Yeah.
Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny is part of that story.
Yeah.
Indiana Jones under Kathleen
3
Kennedy
3
is
of
part
them
of
were
this.
Disney movies. Yeah. 3 of them were
That's right.
Disney movies, and, if I were in charge of Disney, I would look at this and say, "Hmm, maybe we shouldn't be spending so much money on these movies for them to just flop." Unless we I can understand spending 100,000, like almost close to 200,000 for something that really looks like it's going to have a great script. We got a lot of people, loving, what's going on with the script. But this is crazy, $326 million. It's
And
like,
that does not include the marketing fees, the marketing costs. So
yeah,
they lost more
that's a
than that.
lot. Yeah, that's a
So,
lot of money.
but they're on this list. Indy made the list, and these are characters, these are franchises that should never make a list like this. So,
No,
like
yeah.
you said, this was a sure thing, and it ended up here. This is where this ended up.
Yeah,
So,
I think it's because and we can see that there were in fingers involved in the process in the creative process
right.
that probably shouldn't. Um,
Well, the movie should never have been made.
yeah,
Um,
to begin with. I mean, because if you're telling me how this movie was going to start out, how were you going to do another Indiana Jones movie? I would say don't call it Indiana Jones. Give us a side character. We still have Short Round. That's still
well, he would
alive.
have, and his star has risen above Hollywood again.
I know you guys gonna have to pay a lot to get him back into the franchise, but we could have had, his adventures.
If there was a movie that came out and it said Short Round and the whatever of something,
Come on,
I'm
I'm
gonna go see
in.
that movie.
Yeah, I want to go see it too.
Yeah, I'm gonna go see it because it's Short Round. I want to see him the age he is now with the New York Yankees hat on and doing something adventuresome somewhere. Come up with a great script for this guy. The guy is becoming prominent in Hollywood again. He's
Yes,
had a real career resurgence, and I couldn't be happier for him. Um,
I
so
can
he
hear
would have
him
been
now. I can hear him now. He's like, I used to know this guy, Dr. Jones. And like
play with
tell
you,
him
no
about
fun.
him. Yeah. I
Yeah, we'll
learned
see that.
everything I know
We'll see
from
this on
Dr.
Saturday.
Jones.
Yeah. And by the way, join me in retro this Saturday at what time? 2 or 3 o'clock.
It will be 3 o'clock is Central Standard, so that will be 2 o'clock Eastern, and that will be 1 o'clock Pacific.
Okay. Yeah. Join us on
Oh
that. We're gonna watch
no,
a
sorry,
couple of
4 o'clock Eastern. 4 o'clock Eastern. Sorry,
Four
I got
o'clock.
that wrong. Yeah. So 4 o'clock
Yeah,
Eastern, three
that's right.
o'clock
That's right. Okay. Sorry. I got mixed up.
Central Standard, and 1 o'clock Pacific.
Well, any final word on Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, Kennedy's project?
Yeah, I mean, R.I.P. Indiana Jones. We loved you in the 3 movies you were in.
Well, so right about this time, Indiana Jones comes out and it's a disaster. It's a flop. I mean, Kathleen Kennedy's era at Lucasfilm is just starting to mount loss after loss after loss. And these are
Yes,
epic losses.
this is surprising and jaw dropping at this point.
Yeah, it is. It's becoming a phenomenon in and of itself, and she's not done yet. So Indiana Jones came out June 30th, 2023, and a couple months later, August 22nd, Disney Plus releases their next
Oh
big.
boy.
Ahsoka, another female-led show.
Yes.
And well, Retro, you know me. I was excited about this show. I
Yes.
am and have been an Ahsoka Tano fan since around 2010, back when no one knew who she was. There was a small group of us that really got into the animated series. I know I gush over Clone Wars and have for a long time. It made me a fan of Dave Filoni back then. It made me a big fan of Ahsoka Tano and several other, like Bo-Katan. There were several characters from the Clone Wars that kind of that crossed over into the Disney era. And so when I heard that Ahsoka Tano was going to get a live action series, I was excited because I was like, here's the moment. And you may or may not know this. Back during the Clone Wars era, when there was Disney XD on television, before Disney Plus, before the Empire, Rosario Dawson, in pure nerd space only, quiet nerd space, 2010, said she would love to play Ahsoka Tano. And the fans were like, oh man, she's like pretty high up in Hollywood. Like maybe not quite A-list, but close. If you know, Rosario Dawson is a household name, and everyone knew who she was. So when you had this like prominent Hollywood actress chiming in back before Disney took over, when it was just an animated series, being like, I would like to play that character. That was a big deal for all of us fans. Like, oh man, Rosario said she would love. So when not only did I hear they were going to make a live action show, they went back to the source. They went back to the actress who said she wanted to do it, 13 years ago.
Yeah.
Rosario Dawson, she's going to get cast as Ahsoka. It seemed like a good thing, at least on those levels. The problem was everything else, right? Everything else.
I think, and when I think about her, I mean, I think she is a great, she would be perfect for it. I know fans were going crazy. They were already doing like fan art for years. They were doing fan art with her. And she worked out very well in The Mandalorian. Was it season 2? Where she showed up and people were impressed with the little storyline that they had going on for her. And was it the Night Sister that was in there? And they, we had high hopes for this. We were like, oh my goodness, this is going to be great. There were fans really excited about this. So and I think there were also some haters too, because I think there were some people who were already going to not like this because they just didn't like the character, and they were already tired of all of the female pushing that was going on, and like another show with a female character is like, so they were already tired of that. And so they were like, okay, they were rolling their eyes and saying, okay, whatever. And at this point, it was the job of the show to really impress the naysayers and deliver the goods to the people who were fans that really wanted to see good stuff.
Right. So this, I would agree with you. I think this period of time, now that we're settling in, we're deep into 2023. We're starting to see the rebellion. Like I said, I listed off all the different things, including the snub by Spielberg, the fan boycott of Indiana Jones, Nelson Peltz, Karen McCarthy's lawsuit. This is when I remember that there was really no fans excited. Like there were the guys like me who were like, I'm not on board with Lucasfilm. I've been very frustrated with Star Wars. I didn't go see Indy. Like I'm with the fans on this, but I have a special place for Ahsoka, so I'm hoping. So that was the best out of the fandom that you really got. There were very few authentic, in my opinion, super fans for the show before it came out. They were there. There's always going to be
the Clone War people who saw the Clone Wars and all those animated shows back then. They were like, "Oh yeah, this is going to be fantastic." They were hyped. But if you were just, if you were old school Star Wars fan, you're like, "Who's Ahsoka?"
So like I think you said it perfectly. It was up to them to prove everyone wrong.
Yeah.
The ball is in their court. They're going to have to come out swinging with Ahsoka and do something here to kind of turn the fans around, make a show that sticks. And what we saw in the Clone Wars animated series was a very lively, very athletic, very aggressive and heroic, a woman of action, Ahsoka Tano. And what we got in the live action series was pretty much this. I mean,
Yeah, the whole thing. The whole
yeah,
thing.
I was so underwhelmed. I was so here's what I hated. I knew that everybody was against this, and like you said, it was up to the show to prove them wrong. So I was like, come on, Ahsoka, like please, like become
Be
the
good.
next man. Like I was
Yeah.
really secretly. So when I watched it in the opening series, the opening went on with a lot of slow movement. I was like, no,
Yeah.
this
That was a
now Ahsoka's going to be ruined. They're going to ruin Ahsoka Tano. And now when she gets her moment on the stage, on the big stage in front of everybody, people are going to be like, this chick, this is who everyone was excited about. All the fans liked her. My heart broke right away because I was like,
yeah.
I don't think this is happening. I don't think they've got the quality here. It seemed amateur, actually.
Yeah.
There was a lot of scenes of her just kind of like. I remember making movies as a kid, and I remember when you're 14 or 13 years old, you don't know too much about acting, right? So what you do is you think that your character is just cool.
Emoting, yeah.
So you kind of walk, we had fake cigarettes and fake guns because we were detectives and stuff, and so you just kind of you do. This is what you do
Yeah.
because you want to be cool. I don't want to see that level of acting and characterization here. Just showing up isn't enough at this level. You have
Yeah.
to deliver the goods.
Yeah.
What were your
I
thoughts about Ahsoka, the show?
okay. I have a lot of different feelings.
Okay.
I really felt bad for uh, Rosario because I know she was doing, I think, what she thought was, what the best she could. No fault of her. She's great. I love her. She's great. Um, and she looks fantastic. The costuming, fun, everything. All that
Yeah,
stuff
yeah.
is great. The story itself was um, frustrating, to say the least. And then, but there were some really wacky moments where I just laughed my butt off, like her in space fighting.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I'm like, really? This is what you're doing? And so that was an action sequence that they actually said, and we're gonna do this. Um, and it's like, wow, this is crazy. And some people had said, oh yeah, they used to do this all the time on the show, or they did this before, and it's like, okay, but whatever. Um, there were just so many odd moments. It just didn't feel um like it should work, and like Sabine getting skewered. And she made it. She's okay. The next day, she's like, "Oh, okay, let's go let's go on an adventure." Woohoo! Like, I just
Right.
don't like. Yeah, like this. The whole like side of her body should have been missing. Like,
Well,
there's
we
not that
saw
much.
Obi-Wan.
Like back,
Yeah, it
there's
happened
not
to
enough
Obi-Wan
back to
Kenobi where
juice to fix that. I'm sorry.
Say that again.
I said there's not enough back to juice to fix that. You know what I mean?
Well, and it's getting to be a weird problem. In Obi-Wan Kenobi, Reva was impaled not once, twice, and they treated it as if she just got punched and knocked out. Like it's not that big of a deal. And here they do it again, and it's like, what
It's a
world do you get impaled by a lightsaber with zero consequences?
yeah,
And it makes lightsabers
not so
nothing.
bad.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So
I absolutely, felt like that was another, uh, another thing that they did to really lower the standard, or lower the value of nearly everything in Star Wars. So this was very harmful for the lore of Star Wars in general. This entire series. And I feel bad because I had so many chuckles throughout this entire thing, and they're not the good kind of chuckles. They're really like, I can't believe they did that chuckle.
yeah, I it was
Like
almost like
zombies. Oh my god.
it was almost as if like your best friend said he's got this great idea for a comedy skit. So you show up at the comedy club and you're sitting in the audience and you're just watching him bomb and you're just like, oh God, why? Why did we do this? You know, because I really wanted Ahsoka to succeed. Now I will say, and I was very aware of all the problems. Now I did like Balon's Skull. Ray Stevenson, I
Oh
thought
yeah, he was
great.
fantastic.
He was great. He had, for the first time in a long time, real menacing presence in a bad
Yes.
guy.
Oh,
You know, and you just can't manufacture that. The actor has to bring that, and he did. So
yeah,
he was
and
good. Um,
there was a sophistication about the way he portrayed the character too. That's like, oh, you may be able to even have like a decent conversation with this guy instead, and reason with him, but maybe no, he's too dark. It was just
right,
there was just enough mystery and like beauty in the way he was able to convey that character.
right. And I will say this too. There was one episode that I watched multiple times, and I loved it. I don't
Yes,
care.
yes, yes,
There
yes, yes.
there are some people who have torpedoed this and call it absolute nonsense. I think they're wrong. Ultimately, they were
Oh,
right
it's
in
so
that this
good.
episode led nowhere.
Yeah, it didn't
They
go
were right
anywhere.
about that, and I'm
Yeah.
not going to take that away from them. They were right to criticize the fact that this ultimately didn't mean anything. But I think they misunderstood what happened. I rewatched this episode multiple times to make sure I understood it. They were like, she went to this place in her mind. No, she was actually there because
Yeah.
she fell off a cliff fighting Balon's skull, and they could not find her body. And they made it clear that they were searching for her, and she was not showing up on any scanners. So she physically went to this place.
Yes.
When she leaves this place, she shows up in the water again, and they show up on the people looking for her. She shows up on their scanners, and they rescue her. So she did leave the world. She ended up this is called the world between worlds. We
Yes.
covered this several episodes ago. It was introduced in Rebels, the world between worlds.
Yes.
So this is where she's at.
I love this one. Yeah.
Right now, the world between worlds was speculated by fans as a trapdoor to decanonize the sequel trilogy. This was another way to do it because you can go back in time and change events. And so the fact that this was introduced, I remember a lot of people speculating on this just when the movie or the show was announced, because in the show Ahsoka, if you look at the actual logo for it, let me pull that back up. The symbolism of the O in Ahsoka is very. It looks a lot like the world between worlds.
Yes.
Rebels.
Yeah, I didn't even see that before. Yes, you're absolutely right.
Right. So people were pointing out that even the logo suggests they're going to go to the world between worlds and
Yeah.
erase the sequel trilogy. And I thought that was a long shot, but here they are in the world between worlds. And I'll tell you why. I wrote a blog about this. I got really excited about this episode when it aired because it did several things. One, there was speculation that they were going to decanonize the sequel trilogy. And
Yeah.
yes, there is some fantasy to that. There is, you got to smoke crack to believe that, right?
Yeah, that's not going to happen.
Right. I get
Not
that.
at least not in the context of what we know about Disney right now.
Right. So, but the world between worlds is how you would do it. The Ahsoka show is going to feature the world between worlds, and here's the world between worlds. So there are some things lining up if they were going to do it. Secondly, this episode did something that I thought was vital. If you were ever going to redo the sequel trilogy, you had to do something specific. And I think I've spoken about this before, and I'm passionate about this. The right way to do the sequel trilogy, you have to go back to the prequels, because the prequels is a story of a society, a galactic society in its heyday, the Jedi in their heyday, and you have failure. It ends with the good guys all losing.
Yes.
I mean, you just don't. What trilogy takes up 3 movies of your time to say the bad guys lose? The prequels did. The democratic institutions all failed at the same time that the moral religious order fails, at the same time that the galaxy's greatest hero turns to the dark side, all at the same time. It's a pretty big story. It led to total failure of all that is good in the galaxy. And then you have the original trilogy, which is the good guys. A New Hope. The son of Anakin returns. He's going to bring back the Jedi, and you have Leia Organa. She's going to bring back the Republic. You have this idea of renewal, and they go up against the Empire against great odds, and they take down the Empire. So here's the next trilogy. What do you have to do if you're going to do another trilogy? Well, what was the arc? What was the lesson? What went wrong in the prequels? If you're going to try to take a position on this, we saw good guys fail, we saw the good guys come back, and we saw the bad guys fail. So here's the good guys again. Why bother? Why the Return of the Jedi? Why a New Republic? Why bring anything back? Well, because we care, right? We care about the Jedi, we care about the Republic, and our belief is that this is the good way to do society. This is the good way to do Jedi, right? So you have to go back to the prequels and say what went wrong. And your characters have to deal with this in the next trilogy. What went wrong with the Jedi? And you ask fans, they'll give you answers. Well, they lost their way. They became entrenched with the military. They became blind to the dark side. They became generals more so than spiritual leaders. They were too involved in politics, right? What went wrong with the Republic? Well, they allowed a Sith Lord in there. It became a bureaucracy. Remember, enter the bureaucrats. They allowed this system to get gamed, and then they allowed it to militarize to an extreme sense, and they essentially allowed a military takeover, which happened actually in A New Hope. The last remnants of the old Republic have been swept away. So you have to go back and ask those questions again. Should the Jedi be allowed to have attachments? Because that played a big role in the fall of the Jedi. Should we should we rethink Jedi involvement in military conflict? These are the questions that should be asked, and you should show the new characters dealing with it. Leia should be a Supreme Chancellor. She should be dealing with military threats. And Luke says, I'm resurrecting the Jedi, but I'm not going to get involved, right? So you have to go back to the prequels. And I've always known that. If you go back to the prequels and attempt to answer those questions of what went wrong and tell it through a story of conflict through a new sequel trilogy, you can close off not just a new trilogy. You're not just closing off the arc of one trilogy. You're closing off the arc of 3 trilogies. That's a massive task. The only way to do that is to go back to the beginning. So this episode does just that. And this is why I got so excited. They show, and I loved it, Anakin Skywalker going back to teach young Ahsoka Tano some rules, and he's actually giving her a lesson that is taught from both the dark side and the light side.
Yes.
Why isn't this going up there? It is not going up. There it is. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, maybe I have
Great. I love this shot. Oh my God, it's so good.
I watched this shot, this whole sequence over and over and over again. And if you actually spend a little time throughout the entire flashback with Ahsoka, he's giving her real wisdom. So he gives her a light side lesson. So she goes back into the past, and it's a great shot.
Oh, it's beautiful.
She just lands, and it's suddenly Ariana Greenblatt, who I love.
She's great.
She was great. So we get young Ahsoka from the Clone Wars, and she's standing there in this mist, and suddenly clone troopers pop out of the mist. They run past her. From an archetypal standpoint, it's beautiful. They have no beginning, and we don't see where they're headed to. They have no end. They're just passing through this moment, and she's confused. And here comes Anakin Skywalker. And if you were a fan of the Clone Wars, you saw how the Jedi led and fought battle after battle in the Clone Wars. And he seems to be doing that. And he's teaching her this lesson about what it means to be a warrior, how we have to fight for what we believe in, that we can't just roll over. And it seems like good advice. And there's this great scene where he's like, but we must fight on. And he marches away from her as more clone troopers, and you see there's Twi'leks. This is a specific battle in the Clone Wars, by the way. They start running past her, and she's frozen in this moment. She's staring off. She's watching Anakin march to the horizon, and he's marching to his fate. He's marching to destiny to become Darth Vader. And there's a flicker, and there's an explosion going on, and for this one split second, we see him transform into Darth Vader as he marches away before he turns back into Anakin Skywalker and vanishes over the horizon. And honestly, I loved it. It's perfect. It's a frozen moment of perfect storytelling for me. And I thought that they were going back to address. They're doing exactly what had to be done. We're going to ask the question, what went wrong? Because if you listen, they're asking these questions. She's asking these questions. She's like, I thought I didn't come here to become a soldier. And he's like, but you still have to fight, right? So, and then he gives her a dark side lesson, and you see Anakin in his human form with a red lightsaber for the first time. You know, these are profound scenes, in my opinion.
I
Um,
yeah.
Go
I
ahead.
so it is also from, visual point of view, not only that artistically gorgeous, like, especially knowing what we know about Anakin and knowing, you don't have to really even have seen the Clone Wars or any of you don't even have to see the prequels to know what's going on there, as long as you know, like, that's Anakin, that's Darth Vader, who he's gonna become, and
Right.
this is that is it's just a perfect moment, and all of the action in that scene as well is just so beautiful. It's just wonderful.
It really is. And I remember I came on the Heath channel, you joined me, and I was geeking out over this because of all the good that I saw in it.
Oh
And
yeah,
you guys were very clear to warn me, like, Doug, don't get your hopes up. And I was devastated to watch the rest of Ahsoka and see that this episode really meant nothing. If they moved past, they just had it in there, like this perfect thing for me, and then they moved on.
yeah,
And
perfect. And you know what? This would have done very well to be like the second episode or even the first episode or something where we can open the door to something fresh and interesting. No,
yeah,
we open with Sabine moping around and like what is her character anyway? Who is that
yeah,
I know I know the background of Sabine, but it just didn't work for this particular thing for me. I felt like she uh did not have the energy or even the character to actually like make me interested in her. I felt like she was a terrible person. Why would you want her anywhere near you? And
yeah. It just didn't
so
have the gravitas that it needed.
yeah. I
The
mean,
character,
likable characters are so hard to to write, I know, because you want to give your character a little spiciness so that you can separate them from other people, but
right?
like the thing is like we got to feel something for her. I just felt she was moping instead of like actually like being we should felt something sympathetic to her. And then they would take these long looks at just her. And I'm like, why? Get the camera away from this lady. She has no character.
Yeah, and there's this weird, like, boring stoicism to a lot of the female characters in Lucasfilm that really bugged me. I don't know how they got so far
Yes.
off of telling great stories with great female characters. I felt like we had it right before, and then they're like, we care more about female characters than anybody ever before us, and then like they delivered some of the worst ones. So
Yeah.
it,
And
it
I
was just it
wonder
was
if
a
it's
magic problem.
well, I wonder if it's also like we don't want to show our characters struggling or we don't want to show our characters in a certain way um is what like the modern thinking of like we don't want to show women in this particular way or it's going to make them look too weak. I
Well,
don't know. I'm guessing because I it
right.
seems like there's something that's not connecting here. And I've watched a couple of really great movies and shows lately, and I'm like, wait, that's how you do it. Like it's just kind of weird. So it behooves me because you would think Disney, best writers in the world. We got Dave Filoni working on it. He worked on the original,
Yep.
concept of this. He's got this in the bag. And it,
He
for some reason, just didn't work. It didn't have the energy it needed to have. Characters were not likable. And I think a lot of the nostalgia for them, those people who had nostalgia for this, it was really fantastic for them. They're getting to see the the characters that they've watched as cartoons for the first time and live action, and they were loving it and freaking out about it. I love that kind of excitement. So I um, always praised the fact that they love those, this particular series, and that they had fun with it. But from, objectively, this was definitely not
Well,
good
I would have been a
storytelling.
perfect target audience for it because I knew all these characters, and even I
Yeah.
was like, "Look, it's fun to see them in live action, but only if you're telling me a good story, and only if it works. If it's not a great story, if it doesn't work, then I don't care how many live action people you bring in from animation. I don't care. I want it to be good, and I knew this wasn't. And by the way, Grand Admiral Thrawn came back, another character that was from somebody else's idea. It was Timothy Zahn's character. They brought him back, and I wasn't impressed by him. He did not come across as smart to me. You had
Yeah.
the zombie stormtroopers, and some people were acting like it was great and they loved it, and I was like, this feels off brand. I'm sorry, it feels off brand to me. I don't
No,
know if I'm into this.
if I wouldn't have minded it if it was maybe season 2 and we got some weirdness before, and then we graduated to that level. But I think there were too many odd things in this season for you to
Yep,
put also the zombies. We have
Purgils.
witches, we have the Purgo, space whales. We've got Ahsoka floating in space. Things like that was really I laughed so hard. It was sick. I was like, "Oh, this is supposed to be Star Wars? Where did we you mean all this time Luke could have just get out of the
Yeah, it was
he
so
could have
weird.
just
And
floated in space."
yeah, well, and I got to share something with you. So the last show that came out was Mandalorian season 3, right?
Yes.
This is the next show that comes out, and
Yeah.
here is the Nielsen ratings side by side. So you see the viewership in Mando. Now you see that Ahsoka seems to have matched Mando, but that's 2 episodes. It took 2 episodes to match 1 episode of viewership. This is minutes watched. So
Mhm.
of course it's a little bit higher because you're watching 2 episodes. That's more minutes. So
Yeah.
they got the same number, but it took twice as many shows to do it. And
Yeah.
ultimately, if you look at what happened in the following episodes, Mando ticked up, Ahsoka did not. So you look just side by side. Episode 3, 1,115 to 487, 795. That's the worst episode for Mando, but this is
Mhm.
459. It ticked up a little bit.
Yeah.
This is their best episode, 577, but nowhere near any of the Amanda 570, 572, and 575. So the last 3 episodes, like Mando, did seem to maintain its audience, but they have lost half the audience. Look at those numbers. That's almost
Yeah,
half.
they did. In the first 2 episodes, a lot of people were out, and they weren't great episodes.
They
And
weren't.
they were, and it was enough for people to say, "Okay, I guess it's not as good as, it's not that good, so we don't have to catch the rest." Like, you want by episode 2 people to be hooked in,
But this is
and
showing a pattern. Now, just so you know, Ahsoka did place on the Nielsen ratings. However, it wasn't placing on Nielsen's top 10 overall. It was placing on Nielsen's original series top 10. So it's a smaller list, and it was charting, but only on the original list. It wasn't charting on the overall list like Mando could.
Mhm.
So Star Wars is losing its grip on its audience here, and I'm sad to say, but so Mando 3 kept its audience, but they did not show back up for Ahsoka. And
Yeah.
Ahsoka did not hold on to this audience very well, and as we're going to see, it's going to get even worse.
Yeah,
Uh,
because after episode 2, people should be talking to each other, saying how good something is. And that's when you should start to see that uptick on episode 3, 4, like people
well,
like,
here,
"Oh, this is really good. You should watch it."
yeah, but I couldn't. Like I said, I wrote a blog about it. I was excited about it. I couldn't even really endorse it, and after the episode that I loved, it got weirder and weirder, and I liked it less. Like you said, there's just too many. I call them destabilizing story elements.
Yes.
And they just had too many of them, and they
Yes.
destabilized the story. In my opinion, hyperspace travel in Wales. You're asking a lot of the audience.
Yeah,
Introducing
I
a whole
mean
new galaxy.
that's season 4, right? Like you got to spread out these weird things
Right,
amongst.
you have to stabilize
Yeah.
before you can. If you're good, it's okay to destabilize the story. In fact,
No, it's fun.
destabilizing the story becomes really cool if you can restabilize it, because now
Yeah.
you've taken this weird thing and you've made it you've normalized it,
Yeah.
and now
Yeah.
we're in a world where this is possible, this weird thing. So it's a good thing, but you have to take the time to restabilize your story. What they were doing is destabilizing it, moving it along, and then destabilizing it again by adding another weird thing. Now we're in another galaxy. A
Yeah.
long time ago in a galaxy far, far strike that. A long time ago in two galaxies far, far away. So now you're destabilizing it again. Then you add
Yeah.
the witches of Dathomir in there. We don't really understand that. Now they're destabilizing it again. So now you add zombie stormtroopers. You're destabilizing the stormtrooper. Everything's being destabilized. And
Yeah.
some people swear that they did a great job. I'm like, no, I know when a story is unstable, and that's
Mm.
what they have here.
Yeah,
They
I was
can't fix it.
expecting the I was
What's that?
expecting when you're thinking about all the weird things or the destabilizers, I think each each season should have been like that. I mean, that would have been a great way to map out like 5
Right.
seasons right there. And then add it, you must actually have some action for them to do besides just folded arms. Did you get the force yet? Like it's just it was just like, what is going on? Do you or don't you have a crush on this guy? Like, and then when you meet him, like, like what? You guys don't even have. Oh, there you are. You got a crush on him. Like, where's all the tension? Like, I've been missing you. I've done everything to get across the entire universe to a different universe to find you. Oh yeah.
I mean, in all honesty, a lot of times you could build some tension that way too. Have them both be like, "Hey, it's good to see you. It's good to see you," and then try to play it off, and then they can't help it. And here's the other thing: you're in another galaxy.
Yeah.
This should be like, oh my god! Like if you and I landed on Mars, we'd be like, "Holy sh! We're on Mars. This is incredible. Start documenting this." They're
Yes,
just like,
yes.
"Hey, what's up?" No sense at all that they just accomplished a historic achievement. Um,
Yeah.
and I would, and what is it like in this galaxy? Is there anything different? It looks just like another planet as far as I'm concerned. So, as far as I could tell, hopping galaxies didn't mean anything. It was the same as, new galaxy, same as the old galaxy. It's just
Yeah.
planets. So,
Yeah.
is gravity different here? Is the force different? Is it stronger or weaker here? Like, you could have done something to make it interesting. They didn't even bother to do that. So, ultimately, I think Ahsoka season 1 was not good. It had the one episode that I absolutely loved, but I only loved it if they were going to do something with it. The fact that they did nothing with it actually takes away from that one episode.
It's a shame.
I've heard some good things about Ahsoka season 2. We'll get into that later, but
Oh, okay.
a
I'll
lot of
give
good
it a
things
gander.
actually.
I'll
If
give
the
it a
rumors are
gander.
true. It sounds like they're going for a grand slam with Ahsoka season 2.
Okay.
And there is reason to believe that they're going to fix it if Kennedy leaves in 2025. So we'll see. But anyway, where they left off was not good in my opinion. I thought Ahsoka season 1 was ultimately a bad, one of their larger missed opportunities here, and it doesn't help the plight of the girl, the female leads. They're boring us with these
Oh.
female leads at this point. So if you really care about female leads, you got to deliver, and they're just
Yeah.
not.
Yeah, they had their shot. That was their shot right there. And
Yeah.
Ahsoka, I think Ahsoka is always going to have fans. Um, and she's a really good character outside of this particular portrayal here. And it's I don't want to blame. I don't think even the fans that didn't like this show, they have no ill will towards Rosaria Dawson.
Oh no, no.
We know she's an
Yeah.
excellent actress, and that it had to be part of the problem was the script and the direction, and the fact
And
that,
by the way, you didn't hear any so-called racist backlash against her.
I didn't
You know,
see
she's not
any.
a white actress. She's Hispanic, and there was none of the, all the stuff you hear about all the other ones. So like, I don't know. I didn't hear a single bad thing said about
No,
her. Sorry,
fans have
except maybe
been
that she
very,
was slow.
yeah, fans have been very gracious about her. That you can't. In fact, if you start talking smack about Rosario, you will have them at your throat. Okay, they are not. They will not have it. But the
Yeah.
character of Ahsoka is a problem in the series. It's just she was not written well,
No.
and you can see that they're just moments where she's just emoting all day, and we can't have that, as that's not a series. you know that's not a story.
Well,
Having your characters emote everywhere is not a story, unless you're really a good silent filmmaker, which is
well, and so I was looking forward to this. Ahsoka came, Ahsoka went. It was more of the same. It weakened the brand further. I don't think it did
sadly.
much of anything.
Yeah.
That was that. Now the next major event, just so you know, and we covered it a little bit, so we don't have to get into it, but um, uh, September 27th, the writers' strike ends. So the
Oh,
writers are going to come back at least, and that's all. I think Cameron covered the writers' strike in a lot of
yes.
detail, very well. But just for the sake of the timeline to know where it ended, right around the end of Ahsoka Tano premiering. So there's that. And here's another thing. I want to get to this more next week
Ooh.
when we have Lorena Creole. But
Ooh.
September, 3 days after the writer's strike ends, it's announced
Yes.
that the Galactic Star Cruiser is going to close.
Yeah.
This thing, which everyone knew was a bad idea, everyone knew this was an abomination, this was a disaster. Everything about it was wrong. We could see that. You could go on their website and go to see which days were booked up. At this point, nothing was ever booked. No one was going. Disney announces on September 30th, 2023, they're closing the Galactic Star Cruiser. To me, more evidence in reality, crashing in on Lucasfilm, crashing in on Disney. What you're doing isn't working. It's starting to mount. And this was a
Yeah.
$1 billion investment. And this wasn't even open a year. I think it lasted 11 months. Disaster. By the way, that's Forbes magazine. That's Forbes
Yeah.
covering this.
Yeah.
So disaster. Another
Yeah.
disaster. You had Indiana Jones was made one of the wall of shame for biggest losses of income, biggest flops of all time. Now the Disney. So you're starting to see like one after the other now, where
Mhm.
evidence from the real world is starting to pile on Disney.
Yeah,
And
I'm just saying, like, Peltzer must have been, like, laughing, when he saw this
well,
in the news.
when Peltz removed his threat in the beginning of the year,
Yeah.
January he threatened a proxy fight. By February of 2023, he called it off. But when he called it off, he wrote a public statement to Disney.
Ooh.
Basically, I'll be watching. If you keep mishandling it, I'll be back. I will be back to mount a real threat again. Um, so, and now this is a great thing. The last two events are more parts of the rebellion going on against Disney and Lucasfilm. And this one, I think, is a massive culture changer. The South Park episode airs. This is
Oh.
called Joining the Panderverse. And on October 27, 2023,
Oh,
South
boy.
Park releases this episode, and they torpedo Disney and Lucasfilm. They
Oh.
specifically target Kathleen Kennedy, and I've been a fan of South Park for years. And it's always been said, once you are made fun of in South Park, you're in trouble. They tend to get it right. They tend to sense when the culture is shifting, and they tend to hit the nail right on the head. And so what they did is they replaced all the characters with diverse females. And made fun of basically not the idea of diversity necessarily, but the kind of bad brand diversity that Lucasfilm and Disney were becoming famous for. And so
Mhm.
that's what this episode is really making fun of here. And Kathleen Kennedy herself makes an appearance as a South Park character, which I loved. And this made an impact. I am still, it's 2 years later, I'm still seeing memes from the South Park episode. Do you
Oh,
remember when this came out?
oh yes, it was huge. Now I didn't have access um to see the episode, but it was all over the internet. So you could see the entire thing. People were like sharing it. And it became a household, like the household thing. Like everybody was talking about it. Every show was talking about it. Every platform had a clip of it, and it was kind of like the fans going like, "Yeah, look at this. These guys know what's going on." And the thing is that this particular episode was also trying to be kind of neutral. I mean, they
It did make
actually
fun of the
had,
fans too.
yeah, it had some jokes for the fans being made, some fans being a little bit overzealous, but it was also pointing out exactly what was going on, or complaints that fans had about Disney, Lucasfilm, and specifically Bob Iger and Kathleen Kennedy, and all of this sort of strange activity that has been going on in the last, like, I would say, 5 to 6 years, maybe 7 years, that the people were just like, "What's going on? How hard is it for you to create a project with a good script and put it out into the market? How hard is it for you to actually run an amusement park and not mess it up?" It was like there were so many things that people just couldn't get. Like, what are you doing wrong? Are you do you even have any like books or places where you can find out what they did back in the day? How did they do it? Like, because you're not doing it now and you're failing at it so poorly. And so that was what this was about, and a lot of questions a lot of fans had about Disney in particular and the movies that they were coming out with. And uh, Disney is a company that people, even though when we're saying all of these things, we're saying these things because we are rooting for it to turn around. We
Yeah,
remember
absolutely.
the amazing works that they've done that touched our hearts, and we want them to get back to form again.
Yep.
And so that's what this episode really pointed out, and it was beautifully done and with hilarity. And I'm sure it is not fun to be on the receiving end of something like this, but it was needed to be said, and it was funny. It was
Well, for
definitely funny.
years, yeah, and for years, us fans were targeted by the legacy media. We were the problem.
Still
We were
are.
always the problem. We were actually not just the problem, we were really bad people. And man, we need to do something about these terrible people who. And so suddenly in 2023, you start seeing legacy media covering problems within Lucasfilm, problems within Disney. And here, South Park is really, and by the way, they did try to stay balanced in that they did make fun of the fans too. Like Cartman
Yes,
was
they
like,
did.
"Is Kathleen Kennedy under my bed?" And the mom's like, "No, Kathleen Kennedy's not there, poopsie." So, but I would say overall, if you had a pie chart of who it aimed at most, it was mostly the establishment,
Yeah, they did.
Disney and Kathleen Kennedy and Lucasfilm. I think got the worst of it, and so it mattered. At this is what I mean by year of rebellion, 2023. It's coming to the forefront. All these outside forces are starting to show up. There's actual evidence in reality that they can't hide of mass failure. I mean, mass failure, huge
Well,
public flops. Now, South Park is like devoting an entire episode to something that you and I and the YouTube sphere have been intensely focused on, seemingly by ourselves for 8 years now.
yeah,
Now
this was validation.
it was beautifully said. It was validation. It was like, ha. Now, what I cared about in secret, rocking in a fetal position in a corner somewhere. Now, everyone, it's out in public. They were covering it on the news for real. So the rebellion is begun and it's spreading and it's getting worse for Disney and Lucasfilm. So anyway, the South Park episode was definitely another major turning point late in 2023. And I would say, and I remember people even saying then, Kamran Pasha among them, that this is a smooch of death once South Park gets you, because there are culture's professional jesters, and they're not dumb.
Yes.
They're not like vaudevillian, spill coffee on yourself and laugh type joking. These guys are very smart, very intellectual, and they tend to get it just right. So,
Yeah.
and they nailed this one. They got it. And so the
It was
rebellion is
crazy.
right. So 2023 is going to end with another tier of rebellion, and we'll close out with this. But on November 30th, 2023, after the South Park episode airs, Nelson Peltz makes good on his word. He renews his proxy. He's going for it again. He's coming for you, and now he doesn't want a board seat for himself. He wants 3 board seats. He's going to nominate himself and Jay Rizzullo on December 14th of 2023. This is a
Yes.
real fight. This isn't
I
a
remember
threat. This
this.
is a fight, and he's going to go for it. So he is going to lay siege to the fortress of Walt Disney World's Inner Circle, their board of directors, which, by the way, if you think of Disney as this giant thing, Lucasfilm is hanging by a chain below it. They're all under siege at this point. So the year of rebellion has begun. It's been a lot of bad news. There has, in the past, as we've covered Lucasfilm, there have been some hits and some misses. This is a year of misses. This is a year of disasters. This is a year of record-setting problems. This is a year of outside forces attacking Disney, attacking Lucasfilm. You have lawsuits pending. You have South Park making fun of you. You have the trades covering your problems. This is
YouTube videos galore about how much you're failing.
Yeah, that's right. So this year is ending with problems, and it's an election year. So the political side is going to get even crazier. But that's going to do it for our conversation in this one. I thought this was going to be a shorter one. It was not. 2023, the year of rebellion for Lucasfilm and Disney. We have been following this every year. Just a quick recap. Our first episode covered Heir to the Empire. We covered where Lucasfilm was in 2012, the handoff to Disney, and the putting Kathleen Kennedy in charge, and the hiring of J.J. Abrams, and I would say the overall optimism and trust that this was going to work. Episode 2, part 2, we talked about Heyday, where Kathleen Kennedy seemed to be the greatest thing since sliced bread, at least at the box office. She was breaking records. Force Awakens was a success. We talked about The Last Jedi in the third part, which was a turning point. In the fourth part, we saw that the whole thing took a turn. Lucasfilm versus the fans, and we had this strange black and white bipolar pitched lines where the fans were being fought by the corporate executives and the legacy media. And then the next discussion, we covered the period of civil war from 2019 to 2021, in which this changed. The fans had someone they believed in on the inside of Lucasfilm and Jon Favreau, and you saw the Civil War and 2 visions of Lucasfilm split. Last week, we talked about Order 66, where pretty much Kathleen Kennedy won the Civil War, and Favreau's role and influence and ability to produce good content was reduced. And there were some hits and misses there. And then today we talked about 2023 just by itself, the year where it all starts to catch up, the year of rebellion. And now next week, we're going to wrap up our coverage of Lucasfilm and the Kennedy era. Next week is going to be the fall of the Empire, 2024 to 2025. We're going to talk about Gina Carano's lawsuit. So it's going to, we saw the rebellion. Now it's going to get even crazier. We're going to see the final result of this proxy war. We're going to see Kathleen Kennedy sell her house. We're going to see Jenny Nicholson, who's a famous YouTuber.
Yes.
That had 12 million views, by the way, pretty much detailing the destruction of the Galactic Star Cruiser. Next week, we'll have Lorena Creole to help come on and talk about that. Next week, we will talk about the Acolyte. That's a big one.
I have a lot to say.
We all have a lot to say.
We might need a whole episode for that one.
That is the swan song. I mean, that is it. We'll talk about the failure of Star Wars Outlaws, the video game that came out. And then we will talk about Skeleton Crew, which is, by the way, a glimmer of hope for what might be the Favreau or Filoni era of Lucasfilm, a glimmer of hope there with Skeleton Crew. And then we'll talk about the Kennedy article that where she is leaving, and then some of the things that have happened since. And we will wrap it up, and we will have some final words on what we think is the Kennedy era at Lucasfilm.
Ooh.
So, Retro, any last words for our coverage today?
Oh, it's been so much fun doing this. Thank you for putting it together and being so organized and just like going through every single highlight in what has been 10 years or so of coverage
Yeah.
of this. Has just been so insane to think about, like from like 215 to now where we've been, and it's eye-opening to see exactly how bad this has gotten, and where we were. Like, we were already in bad, but how bad it's gotten, and to lose, it almost feels like we lost Indiana Jones in like Indiana Jones. We still have the 3 movies, but it still feels like we lost something in that, and that whole exchange, and that Lucasfilm, the pride and joy of my childhood, of all the movies that came out under Lucasfilm, is like tarnished now, and like 30 years later. How's that possible? I'm
Yeah.
just so surprised by it all. I don't think I'll ever get over it, and a lot of people are mad about that too. They're not coming back. They're not coming back. They're not gonna see the new projects. They're just done with it. And that I'm feel
Well,
so. Oh, go ahead.
yeah. Well, I was just going to say, if we're right and this is the end of the Kennedy era, and I believe it is,
I hope so. I
then
hope.
there's going to be a new era.
Yeah.
And as that new era takes shape, especially if we start getting good Star Wars, then this era and what we're doing, our look back at all of this, is going to take on an even stronger dimension, because this is an anomaly. It lasted a long time, but this was an anomaly. None of this should have happened. It never should have lasted this long.
Yeah.
And it did. And now it's over, thankfully.
Yeah. I mean, I don't hope for her, like I have a lot of respect for her career, but what has been going on is just really not the greatest example of her capabilities. Okay. And so if somebody else can come in and just, do a much better job. Okay. I know it's a tough job, but I know that if somebody can come in and do a much better job and lead us into where you say a new era of Star Wars, a new era of, Lucasfilms, possibly new IPs. Cause like that's another issue with Lucasfilm, is that where are the new IPs coming out of Lucasfilm? This is such a talented studio. It's like, what happened to it?
Right.
The downgrade is just awful, with all the money in the world backing it for anything that, they want to do. And it's astounding. Like, maybe we just need fresh ideas, or maybe we just need someone who knows exactly what Lucasfilm audience wants, because there's just a disconnect somehow.
Well, fresh ideas come from creative minds, and it comes from someone who understands the material on some level. And if my thing was, and I'll get into it, we'll make some kind of like closing statements, so to say, or final thoughts next week.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to have a big audience next week. I think everyone's going to be there, and we're all going to be able to chime in and give our final words on the Kennedy era of Lucasfilm. And ultimately, I think that they wanted to get away from their product. I think they wanted Star Wars to be something that it wasn't, and they were so eager to change Star Wars that they never finished the projects they started, and they immediately tried to insert new projects, and they didn't even understand what they did, and it was rushed, it was foolish, it was incompetent, and it was misguided. It's ultimately going to be studied at some point as a what not to do. This is a franchise that went awry at the end of the day.
Yes.
And I think that 2023 was the year that these crows started coming home to roost. And I see the list here, 2024 to 2025, it ain't going to get a lot better. It's going to get a lot
Yeah.
worse.
Yeah.
So,
So
so anyway, yeah, that's it for us today. It was we started with a bigger group, and then in the end, it was me and Retro, the rule of
Yay!
two.
That's right. Ooh.
Yeah. So I hope you enjoyed it, everybody. We have enjoyed covering the Kennedy era at Lucasfilm in depth, in detail, kind of chronological, in chronicle order, seeing how it all played out when these things happen. Because when you try to remember it, it's all up there in a mix, in a hodgepodge. So it's nice to kind of slow it down and break it down. And we will finish this coverage next week. So thanks for joining us, and we'll see you later.
Bye, guys.